Just remind everyone that it is a hybrid meeting. And so two of our directors are joining us virtually. Sky is already on. Alan said he's planning to be here, so maybe it's a little later. Let's call the roll of members. Karen?
Here.
Reg?
Here.
Keith?
Here.
Dennis?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
Bill?
Here.
Lynn?
Here.
Chris?
Here.
Sky?
Here.
Thank you all. I'd like to move on to announcements of closed meetings. There was a meeting of the Risk Management Committee on June 22nd, 2023. Aaron, Alan, Dennis, Reg, and Susan were present. Meeting started at 6:05 p.m. It was closed under Section 4, Part 4, consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, and other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. The purpose was to review and discuss general liability instances and related matters and documents. Meeting was ended at 6:56 p.m. There was a meeting of the Architectural Resource Committee on Monday, July 10th, 2023. The meeting was closed at 1:07, opened at 2:27. The ARC members present were Deb Bach, Carolyn Payton, Carlina Calito, Alina McNair, Nema, and Carolyn McPhee. The vote closed was 5-0. It was closed under Section 4, consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation. And the reason to close was discussion of new and ongoing covenant cases. And lastly, there was a closed meeting of the Audit Committee on July 26, 2023. Committee members, Jim Young, Jim Redmond, Bill, Sky, and Lynn. The vote to close was 5-0. Meeting was closed at 8:07 p.m. and it was closed under sections 1 and 4, a discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. The closed portion of the meeting ended at 9:20 p.m. The purpose was to review internal controls related to matters with CA's independent auditors and other communications with the Office of Audit and Advisory Services. So those are the closed meetings we have. Before I get to the approval of the agenda, I want to acknowledge that tonight we have County Council District 4 Representative Deb Young with us tonight. I want to thank her for coming and offer Deb an opportunity to come up and address the board if she'd like.
And Andy, this is Alan. I arrived at 7:02.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Alan.
Good evening. It is a pleasure to see all of you here tonight, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I appreciate it. I just wanted to say a few words about HOCO by Design. HOCO by Design is our general plan, which has been in process now for 3 years, and we are coming to a close. I want to make sure that you have some understanding of what the plan says about Columbia, and particularly Columbia Newtown zoning regulations. And I hope that you all will be involved and that I will see you at least one or maybe two of our very last two public hearings because there's not much more time to testify, and I think that it's important to hear the voice of the Columbia Association. I know this group means a lot to me, and that as representatives of over 100,000 people, it means a lot to a lot of people in our community. So what is HOCO by design? It's the general plan used as a growth planning tool that sets forth policy statements that are used to guide comprehensive rezoning, which includes changing zoning regulations and zoning districts. And I have a handout for everybody. I'm not going to read this all out loud because that's the last thing you guys need, okay? But I do want you to know that there are, trust me, I've seen this enough. So there is a plan for 27,000 units in this general plan for growth. Probably the majority of it would be for townhouses and rental apartments. With about 4,000, as you can see from the chart on the front, for single-family detached homes. And 414 of those would be slated to go into Columbia. 7,000 of the 12,000 apartments are slated to go into Columbia. So we would get the vast majority of apartments. Where will growth occur? As you can see, Gateway, Village Centers, which are now designated as activity centers, commercial parking lots and strip centers, and neighborhood infill. And that is because there is very little green left in the county. 2% of our land left is developable. So rather than put it on actual pieces of ground, it will now go into parking lots. And the majority of the suggested development for the parking lots are apartment buildings. So the next thing that I thought was important for everybody to know is the major provisions of new town zoning. And you can see what those are: the district size, which must be 2,500 contiguous acres, flexibility in land use, permits all uses that are allowed in other county zoning districts except heavy manufacturing and mobile homes, open space preservation. We all know that that is the thing that we love, love, love about our beautiful town of Columbia, and that is required to be 36% of the land here in Columbia. Overall housing density, 2.5 dwelling units per acre of new town. Many of us, particularly those of us who live in single-family detached homes, know very well what that 2.5 acres looks like and feels like, yes, because we are there. And overall, mixed use requirements. Newtown requires a mix of various land uses with minimum and maximum percentages and allows flexibility in the geographic placement of those uses. I found this one sentence probably one of the more interesting sentences from my perspective in the entire general plan. The general plan does not change these provisions. Any changes to new town zoning would be considered through a public process to update the zoning regulations. But then, as you can see on the next page, there are the policy statements regarding new town zoning called Character in Future Development. And number 5 of our policies, implementing policy statements, or the implementing action, is revise the new town zoning district and investigate the use of enhanced design guidelines and character-based or form-based codes in Columbia. Build upon the preferred development types. I'm not quite sure what they mean by that because I'm not sure what the preferred development types are here in Columbia. Consider the design and planning principles illustrated in HOCO by Design's Focus Area Studies technical appendix. And there's an appendix that has a whole bunch of different design ideas, but I'm not sure exactly how those would apply to Columbia. Explore rules and requirements for design review by the Design Advisory Advisory Panel. Columbia is not subject to the Design Advisory Panel, which we all sort of call DAP, except for downtown Columbia. So it's a little bit easier, I guess, to get something through design-wise in Columbia because it isn't subject to DAP. Identify the appropriate purpose and timing of design review within the development review process. So those would be some pretty big changes. I think that there might also be some changes suggested on whether or not to change the density in Columbia, whether or not to allow these apartment buildings that are being suggested for places all over Howard County to be also put in parking lots here in Columbia. And so this is a heads up to you all to let you know what is being discussed right now at the county level through DPZ and through the county council. This is, as a general plan, it's just general. So but it lays out a foundation for what happens next, which is comprehensive rezoning. And that will happen after there is a committee that is convened to look at the APFO regulations, the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance, which determines whether or not our schools are overcrowded and whether or not our roads are already too filled to not be able to handle any more development. So the APFO committee convenes right after we pass the general plan. They meet, they make recommendations on whether or not to change APFO, and then at that point in time, the county council is given recommendations from the Department of Planning and Zoning on new, what is called comprehensive zoning regulations. So they will look at this entire general plan, which is this thick at this point, and then they will make a decision. Then they will make decisions about what zoning regulations to change, and they will give those zoning regulation changes to the county council. We examine them, we will amend them, and then that's what gets passed as a result of this process, which probably will take until the end of this term, this county council term. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah,
Eric.
I got a couple questions. So does this drive APFO, or is APFO independent of this? I mean, could you sort of explain how this works with APFO?
They're really very separate things, and why we have to examine APFO in light of what is being suggested as a change to the general plan, the changes within the general plan is a little concerning to me, but it is required by law. So the last council, when they changed the APFO regulations and made it so that there was actually a cap for high school, you can't have more than 115% of the students in the high school, 110 capacity in the middle school, and 105 in the elementary school. That also meant that that no more new development could occur. They would have to be put in what we call the weight bin if any of those schools were over 105, 110, or 115. And then after a period of time, somewhere between 3 and 5 years, that particular project gets out of the weight bin regardless of whether or not the schools are over capacity still.
So along those lines, just a follow-up question. So I see 25,000 units. I'm guessing that equates to about 10,000 students or so, 10, 15,000 students roughly, just a guess. Is there anything in the general plan that plans for new schools to support the additional student population?
No. Other than revisiting APFO so that it's actually has higher limits, so that more students would be able to go to the schools that are now going to these schools. That's the one recommendation. There's a whole chapter on public schools. It's chapter 8. And I suggest that you go read it. It's right on our website, not the county, well, actually, it is on the county council's website. It's right on the county council's website, and it talks about public schools and this plan. And one of the suggestions that is made is that we revisit APFO and rethink whether or not we want to continue in the manner that it is being continued right now.
Okay, Alan has a question. Alan?
Alan?
Thank you, and sorry for the dog. Deb, I know this is a hard question. If you had to give this process and plan a percentage grade, from 0 being we failed on all accounts, 100 being we hit the mark on the process and the product, what percentage would you give it, and what are 2 or 3 reasons why you give it that percentage?
Wow, Alan.
You don't have to.
Oh,
You could phone a friend.
People answer.
what, for brevity, I would give the plan a 0. It is 357 pages, and it has, I don't know, maybe 150, maybe more pages of index and appendix. We've had 2 more than 67-page reports that inform the other pieces in this general plan. So that's another 130 pages. So all told, we are way over 500 pages, maybe 600 pages for what is the accumulated general plan at this point. The last general plan was, I think, around 200 pages. So the 2030 was around 200 pages, and much more succinct. For overuse of jargon, I would give this plan, I guess I would give the plan a 100% for overuse of jargon, actually. It's done a really good job on using planning and planning jargon, yeah. So that has been a little rough for those of us who are not in that area. I think some of the ideas are really good. I think it's, nice to see what some of our departments are planning, but again, most of what it says in here about department plans are just what the departments are already doing, and then they're saying that they're going to continue to do more of it. But I imagine the general public doesn't know that. So I think that that's useful to have that information in there. To base the majority of our growth on apartment buildings in shopping center parking lots doesn't seem like, to me, the best way to move forward. I would like to see more opportunities for people to buy smaller homes, condominiums, something that would allow them to build generational wealth so that they can get a start here in Howard County. A lot of people want to live in Howard County, and we don't have a lot of greenfields left to build big homes or even any kind of single-family detached homes. So there are opportunities, but if it's all rental, then there aren't going to be opportunities for people to buy. And I think that a lot of the people who want to move to Howard County are still interested in buying something. And it needs to be at a moderate income, for people who are moderate income and can afford to buy things like that. So I would have liked to have seen a lot more attention paid to how we can get people into homes and not just apartments. So for that,
Any other questions?
Just,
Karen?
hey, Deb,
skip
has
the
the
grade.
council
Thank you.
heard any
Thank you, Deb.
testimony at all on the size of the hospital? and adding this capacity when our hospital is already too small?
I think maybe one person or two people actually mentioned the hospital, but we have gotten written testimony about the issues with the emergency room and the fact that people have to wait for hours and hours and hours in our hospital, and that people have asked that we include the hospital in the APFO as part of one of the facilities that we measure when we're contemplating adding 27,000 units in Howard County. So we have been told over and over again that we can't actually add the hospital because it's not our county public facility. We can only measure public facilities that the county has control over. But other jurisdictions do include some of these entities within their measurement. So I'm not sure why we don't, but it is something that some of us are thinking about quite a bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Appreciate you coming. out
Okay,
tonight.
I'm happy.
And I just wanted to say that the county council has a nice website, and they have all the dates for the hearings, which are in September, listed there. So if you want any more information, visit the county council website.
Okay, guys, this is my book, and now you can see I got a 0 for brevity. And just remember, this isn't even everything, okay? There are other reports that are not in this, but I did want to offer, if any of you guys would like to meet with me, either as a smaller group, or if you would like to come and discuss this more as a board, I am happy to do so. Now that I have read all 685 pages. Thank you all. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will remind the board, remember to talk into the mics.
Andy, you too, please. Thanks.
I'm squeezing in. Thanks, Al. Okay, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Eric?
Second.
Red seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose an amendment to the agenda.
Yeah, what would you?
I would like to, given time, if we have time at the end of our evening, time allowed, I would like to put on the agenda the topics of resident speak out and the early closure of pools. 15-minute discussion on each if we have that time. If we run out of time this evening, I'm happy with not addressing them at this meeting. That's my motion.
I'll second it.
Let me get sure. So this would go after like 8?
Yes, at the very end, just before questions only, and if we vote that we do not have sufficient time to discuss them, we don't have to at this meeting.
Could you add a time cutoff? Should we?
15 minutes.
No, I mean like a actual time, like 9:30. That it wouldn't apply.
I think it would be the will of the board. I think it's going to be, if we're engaged and we're full of energy at 9:30, we should do it. If we're exhausted at 9:30, we could say it's too late. It's the will of the board at the end of the meeting, I think. So.
Anybody object? All right.
Guy had her hand up.
Sky?
My question was answered, thank you.
Okay.
Alan, do you have
I'd like to propose a friendly amendment that we do pools first.
That's
So, because I think that's more pressing than resident speak out.
all right.
There's no such thing as a friendly amendment, sorry.
In our practice, we do those things.
I do have pools listed and then residents speak out. That's how Bill it.
That's fine.
All right. Hearing no objections. Does anybody have any objections to the amended agenda?
I do have one point of order. So under board votes, under revised testimony,
Yes.
I don't believe that this has come before this board, so this is the first reading of this. So does this require 2 readings?
No, because we did actually approve testimony, and what we're asking for is simply a rewording of that testimony.
Yep.
Yeah. But that's
We didn't just
why.
reword the testimony, though. We took things out. So I actually think Eric's right that it needs more discussion.
Right, but as I said, we can choose to just send the original testimony, which the board's already approved. That's why it got on, because board's already addressed it. All right, hearing no further objections, we'll approve the agenda. We're going to move now on to the President's Report. Columbia update. Dennis?
So while we're waiting to queue up the first video, what I'd like to say, and I haven't said this enough, is how incredibly proud I am of CA staff. Susan Krabby, sitting right over there, was named one of the top 25 CFOs in Maryland. Before I go any further, I'd like to say she's number one in my book. And the rest of the staff, I think that really, Susan's done an incredible job. It also speaks to the high quality of team members that are on staff. We just recently lost 2 team members to very high positions at the county. Jeremy has won a number of awards. I would say each and every day I go out and see staff members, I'm just amazed at the work they do and how hard they work. They're down there right now at the lakefront, 95 degrees. We got a great concert going on, which I'd be if I wasn't here. But I am so, I'm just so incredibly proud of the people that I work with every day. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Susan.
So if you have never been to a swim meet, and you're laughing, but if you've never been, you have to go. They are the most incredible things, not because of the high quality, and there is some, but because of the kid that barely makes it to the end of the pool, and everybody's cheering him on. It's just the most fun you can possibly have. And the swim program speaks to bringing community together in Columbia.
I agree.
I look at that and think to myself, we bring good things to life. and you probably miss me in the background, but for those of you who haven't been down there for Dancing Under the People Tree, you have 17 opportunities, and it's a wide range of skill level and age groups, and it's an incredible program, a long-standing tradition, and a wonderful program. Brings people to Lakefront. It's great. If you haven't done it, give yourself a chance.
Thank you for coming out to our very first International Grocery Store Tour.
But this is really delicious. Fried oil or pan fried, but typically it's deep fried. That's what we'll be tasting. In sancocho are very, it has a much more subtle flavor.
So Grace Chang started a monthly program, international program, in the international food markets that are led by volunteers. It's about, how Columbia is a multicultural, diverse place. It's about bringing the entire community together. And I'll pause here. So I've got some still photos. I don't have the drone shots or drone video of the lakefront on July 4th. There's a great saying, the county, Howard County brought the fireworks. CA brought the celebration. I mean, we did, there were so many people. I was on a Zoom call with the police department and fire department, and they said it is the most crowded Columbia has ever been.
Wow.
It was an incredible, remarkable, bringing people of all age groups, diverse, multicultural. I looked out in the crowd, and there are moments in your life when you know it works. And that was a moment for me, and a moment for us and for the Columbia Association, because we ran it. literally, it would have only been fireworks without CA and without CA support. So I think we can congratulate ourselves on that. And it was the most amazing thing. And if you didn't get down there, some of you I know, it's a little crowded. It's funny, the other thing I'll say is we're talking about parking, and of course, they were saying two funny stories. One, the guy who was monitoring traffic at Hickory Ridge Road and Broken Land Parkway, fireworks are over, a group of 40 walk up. And he says, "Where are you going?" "To see the fireworks." And he said, "Well, that's the smoke that you see. The fireworks are over." But they were having a hard time finding parking, so it took them a long time to get down there. The other piece is we're talking about parking and how to do that better. And we talked about Blandair Park, and then it occurred to me, well, of course, you can park more people, but I don't think we can. I mean, 5 more people maybe could have fit downtown. It was literally shoulder to shoulder. It was the most people I've ever seen, and it was a well-behaved crowd. They had 2 very, very small incidents. I mean, it speaks to what a great community Columbia is.
That's great. That's awesome.
Very nice.
Any questions?
Thank you, Dennis. Actually, I do.
I do.
All right, Alan, I'll let you go first.
Thank you. Just wondering, Dennis, we always ask in the president's report to talk about challenges. So besides pool closing, what are we looking at as challenges at this point?
So I would say the continuing challenge is staffing, and I spoke to losing a couple key team members, and so that is a continuing challenge for CA. And then a challenge is going to be, wrapping up and moving forward on stream restoration and sustainability and, all the other, adopt, spot, invasive species, and creating the recognition for the kind of company that Columbia Association is. We bring good things to life. We're out in the community. We have people doing volunteer work. We're helping every day. And so I don't think I have not done a good job with that narrative, and I need to change that. So it's a challenge for me.
Thank you, Dennis.
Any other questions? That's the only one I have is I noticed the sinkholes.
Yeah, so so there were a couple of sinkholes adjacent to the pavilion which were addressed, and it has been a little bit of a recurring problem, but we do have a capital project to address the pavilion, and part of that will be that issue.
Thank you. Always appreciate your videos, and also very nice that you highlight a lot of things that you may not know CA does. I remember the Dancing on the Stars started with Maggie.
Yeah.
Yeah, Maggie Brown, and so it goes back. Thank you. Okay, going to move on now to Resident Speak Out. And we have a number of folks signed up both in person and virtual. Just remind everyone that, when you signed up, you acknowledge that you will not conduct any personal attacks while speaking. You will not use inappropriate or offensive language, and you will respect the time limits for each speaker, 3 minutes as an individual, 5 minutes as a group. All right, and so first up, Brian England. Welcome, Brian. And he's representing ACCA.
Yes.
A second.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yep, so I'm Brian England from Clary's Forest, and I represent the HCCA Newtown Committee. So now that the WSSI project is behind us, I'd like to encourage the board to fund an update to the Columbia Watershed Management Plan, as recommended 5 years ago in the 2017 Open Space Assessment, and using emergency funds. This is a good time also to put a moratorium on all county and CA watershed projects in Columbia until the Columbia Watershed Management Plan is updated. At this time, the county is not interested in caring for the environment when planning watershed projects. Here is a recent example.
Thank you.
You can keep talking.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this recent example was where acres of woodland and shrubs were removed. The area was successfully soaking up stormwater from 4 outfalls for 40 plus years. Now it's a lake, It became a lake because when they were digging the hole for what they were supposed to be retaining water, they hit groundwater. So it proceeded to fill up over a course of a few months. Millions of dollars were actually washed away, and they have just made matters worse. The county track record is dismal. A while ago, John McCoy gave me a tour of the washed-out River Hill Branch project in Ellicott City. All the newly planted trees were washed away because the county had failed to mitigate the stormwater from one single outfall. In Columbia, Great Oaks Way, Deb's gone now, that's her street, that project was washed out in the first rainstorm. $50,000 and an acre of trees just torn down for nothing. New Country Lane project removed acres of trees and caused more erosion. This goes on, and it's hard to, how many minutes I got? Okay. Find a project that the county has done properly. Now the county is planning a project right in our neighbourhood of Bright Passage in Clouds Forest. They want to remove 21 more trees and will not address the root cause of the erosion, and that's the stormwater coming off the streets. I would now like just to refresh people's memory or just get people up to date on the timeline when CA first was presented with a watershed plan by Versa in April 2009. Following that, in April, in June the 22nd, Watershed Protection Framework was introduced. This guided the implementation of the Columbia Watershed Management Plan, and it outlines the responsibilities of staff, the Watershed Advisory Committee, and the CA Board. Then just a bit later in the year, in December, the Watershed Advisory Charter was presented. This guided what the Watershed Advisory Committee's responsibilities were. It was approved by the External Relations Committee to a 3-0 vote, and the board subsequently approved it. WAC then discussed many aspects of various watershed policies over a few meetings. This led to, on March 1st in 2011, WAC approved and sent to Steve Harborough and John McCoy the stream restoration guidelines and recommendations to execute the first phase of the Columbia Watershed Management Plan. The original 2009 committee recommended that phase 1 of the Columbia Watershed Management Plan concentrate on Lake Elkhorn's subwatershed. The area was nicknamed the Pork Chop by the committee that first reviewed the plan presented by Versa. Phase 1 was 18 restoration projects and early action projects like rain gardens and tree planting. Over 5 years ago, on April 2017, the Open Space Assessment Report was released. By this time, 15 of the 18 projects were completed, and the staff Open Space Assessment Report recommended in its implementation matrix, page 31, item 7, that the CA update the Columbia Watershed Management Plan. A team of CA staff under James Demler took 6 months to put this review together. So I urge you to update the Columbia Watershed Plan and put the freeze on all Howard County projects in Columbia.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay.
Any questions for Brian? Bill?
Hey, good evening, Brian. Thank you for your testimony tonight. The county projects that are being done that you referenced here, are those on county land?
There are different different types of land, but they affect, every one of them affects Columbia property, CA property. So like we saw with the Wood Creek one that we reviewed earlier last year, and the other one is the one that's on Bright Passage. That's on county land as well. But I want you to advocate for putting a freeze on these projects. I understand it's not in the preview of the CA board, but they still can be an actively pushed to have things put on hold.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Rich?
Hi, Brian. I was just getting ready to ask you, is that a copy of your presentation?
Yes, it is, yes.
Oh, okay. So that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, and if you've got any questions, you'd always call me.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is that it?
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Very nice bond paper that you hand out here. That's good
Only
stuff.
the best for the CA board.
All right, next up is Sarah Keller. hope I got your name right. And she is Protect Our Ponds. I assume you're speaking on behalf of them.
Yes,
Welcome, Sarah.
thank you. For those of you who are voting against the Elkhorn Branch Stream Restoration Project, I appreciate you. I had a look at the Columbia Association's strategic plan today, which includes the priorities and goals set forth to guide everyone at CA. One strategic priority that caught my attention was the priority of environmental sustainability, with a goal to advance Columbia as a leader in environmental sustainability in Maryland. Webster's definition of sustainability is of, referring to, or being a method of harvesting or using a resource so that the resource is not depleted or permanently damaged. If we look at the Elkhorn Branch stream restoration as an example of how CA operates on an environmental level, however, it appears that CA does not even assess damages at all, much less take steps to avoid any permanent damage. I'm honestly not sure if assessing and minimizing damages was even a thought within CA until specific residents brought it up. And this is just the beginning of CA's lack of environmental sustainability practices. Sorry, y'all. Generally speaking, people and organizations who are leaders in environmental sustainability follow science. They listen to experts, they read studies, and have genuine intellectual curiosity on the subject. They have deep, healthy respect for mature ecology. They carefully consider scientific data, and they certainly do not need to be told why trees are crucial to healthy watershed management. Further, the decisions that they make reflect these considerations, and they actually take big steps to protect and preserve their natural resources. None of this seems to be consideration in Columbia. Unfortunately, in Columbia, I have to clarify this. If your organization's environmental practices consist of listening to the sales pitch of a guy who's going to make millions from clear-cutting your forest without even a requirement to show evidence of biological uplift in order to get most of those millions, and then no one in your organization stops once to check the science on that sales pitch before giving the go-ahead on this proposed project, then I am sorry to tell you, but your organization is many light years from being a leader in environmental sustainability. To add insult to injury to residents, the ones who are subject to the impacts of any poorly considered projects, when residents have shared their concerns about CA's lack of sustainable action, they have often been dismissed and their concerns disregarded. This is all exposing a culture within CA that is not reflecting any sincere interest in environmental sustainability. It is instead a culture that values greenwashing and other forms of environmental deceit. The proposed Elkhorn Branch stream destruction highlighted just how badly a culture shift is needed when it comes to environmental practices in CA. And sadly, CA will never reach the goal of being a leader in environmental sustainability without this culture shift. As part of this culture shift, some big things need to happen. The WAC needs to be reformed with actual experts and with people who are interested in and care about science and who consider matters beyond what CA staff advises. Staff members need to be replaced with people who understand hydrology and ecology in watershed management and who further maintain an ethical interest in acting on behalf of environmental sustainability over building development. And CA Board, well again, if you were voting against the Elkhorn Branch Stream Restoration Project, I do appreciate you. If you have been voting for it, My only hope is that you are able to take a step back, consider the truth behind what you have really been pushing for, and perhaps consider learning more about ecological impacts and minimizing them before voting for anything in the future.
It's time.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions? Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Next up, Ying Mattis. Is she here? She's supposed to be here in person. And I don't see her online. Next up, Bob Dover. Welcome, Bob.
Hi, folks. So I understand that there's been some changes to the Elkhorn Branch project. I hope this is now a time when CA can pause the stream restoration program as I requested some time ago and return the focus to the approved 2009 watershed management plan, to rely on scientific information within the past 15 years to develop science-based solutions, to de-emphasize the desires of vendors and developers who are seeking to use CA's land holdings to generate profits for themselves, and to more actively include residents in future decisions. In my career, I've worked with mitigation banks for a lot of years, and I'm not opposed to the concept of mitigation banking. However, my prior experience has been with mitigation banks that are operated by the state, and they're situated on very large parcels of state or federally owned land. These banks have always been large enough so that the state can control the runoff as part of the project, and the project doesn't adversely affect adjacent homeowners because there aren't any usually. In addition, because they're operated by the state, the specific activities aren't driven by profit motives for the private developers. Once I learned the details of the Elkhorn project, I was shocked because none of those conditions apply to this project. The bank was going to be established without controlling runoff, which makes the entire effort futile. The project is on a narrow parcel of land very close to residences, meaning that the visual and hydrology impacts to the residents would have been substantial. And finally, the profit motive had led to a plan that would fix areas that didn't need to be fixed. The watershed management plan identified several thousand feet of stream needing restoration. However, in an effort to get someone else to pay for that work, CA agreed to let a private developer destroy 33,000 feet of stream in a residential area. That's an unacceptable level of unnecessary impacts to the existing ecology and the adjacent homeowners, and only benefited the bottom line of the private developer at the expense of the existing residents. So I hope that your plan B for Elkhorn, and I'm sure there's one coming, doesn't involve a similar scheme. There's places where stream restorations and mitigation banks may be appropriate. A narrow strip of trees closely constrained by homes in a residential neighborhood is not one of those areas. That's what the scientific articles say. CA has operated for years with very little community interest in the watershed program, but that lack of interest is now at an end. These actions that have been taken are now going to be watched more closely, and when they inflict substantial impacts and appear to be favoring private developers over the current residents, they're going to be scrutinized by the residents. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions?
Eric.
So,
I'm sorry.
so where would stream restoration be appropriate?
What the scientific articles say is you want to have a wider area so that you can expand the floodplain, because streams want to have wide floodplains. But if the floodplain is constrained by 175 on one side and some townhouses on another side, there's very little you can do in that narrow space that's going to be effective in improving water quality or ecology. So you need wider areas that aren't constrained on either side is the simplest answer.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Brett.
thank you.
Hey, Bob. So if it is constrained from one side to the other side, what's the result? What happens?
Well, what happens is that the streams naturally run our road and meander, and I know that's inconvenient when you have adjacent trails and highways and infrastructure, et cetera, but it's what streams naturally do. And so when you constrain the stream and don't let it do that, and especially when you don't control runoff, then it incises, which is what you see. And
I'm sorry, what did you say?
It incises, it digs its channel deeper because it can't go side to side anymore.
Okay.
So, and that's what you see. You don't have any easy solutions. I'm not claiming you do, but you do have a watershed management plan that identified these areas and came up with sort of mini plans for these areas, and that's not what was proposed here.
Okay, thank you.
Keith?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Bob. Next up, we have Sharon. I see you're in the audience here, Sharon. Representing Protect Our Streams. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. Thank you again for this opportunity, and thank you to the board members who stood up for Lake Elkhorn against the WSSI proposal, and in doing so, protected our environment, our covenants, and our quality of life. You set aside the notion that the proposal was good for the watershed and that there would be reduced dredging costs for Lake Elkhorn. My family moved to Columbia in 1969 when I was 5 years old. I met Jim Rouse as a child, and I felt like I was a part of something special growing up around here, a utopia, one that as citizens we should feel free to protect. So you can only imagine my shock and surprise in July of 2021 when I received a threat of legal action after I spoke out in an op-ed about the Longfellow stream restoration, just giving Columbia my opinion and a heads up on the Elkhorn Branch project. On October 29th, 1963, James Rouse revealed to the Howard County Commissioners that he had purchased land and proposed to develop the land into a, quote, balanced, planned community that would fit naturally into the Howard County landscape, preserving the stream valleys, protecting hills and forests, and providing parks and green belts, end quote. Jim Rouse recognized nearly 60 years ago how much these protected areas would contribute to the betterment of our community and our quality of life. These forests are here now because they have been preserved for us. Mature trees and forests are some of our best tools for combating climate change, global warming, and species die-off. We are so fortunate to have them. From the book, Columbia New Cities, James Rouse was quoted as saying, "Our cities grow by sheer chance, by accident. A farm is sold and begins raising houses instead of potatoes. Then another farm. Forests are cut, valleys are filled, streams are buried in storm sewers. Thus, bits and pieces of a city are splattered across the landscape. By this irrational process, non-communities are born, formless places without proper beauty or reason, places with no visible respect for the people or the land. Thousands of small, separate decisions made with little or no relationship to one another, nor to their composite impact, produce a major decision about the future of our cities and our civilization, a decision we have come to label suburban sprawl. What nonsense this is. What reckless, irresponsible dissipation of nature's endowment and of man's hope for dignity, beauty, and growth. End quote. Protect Our Streams and the Columbia Watershed Alliance feel we owe it to all future generations of people and wildlife to continue to preserve and protect what was preserved for all of us all of those decades ago. For now, the Elkhorn Branch Stream and forested watershed and all of its wildlife and residents have breathed a tremendous sigh of relief, and we are thankful. From Henry David Thoreau, every oak tree started out as a couple of nuts who stood their ground. From the book, The Lorax, I speak for the trees. Let them grow, let them grow. I meant no harm, I most truly did not. But I had to grow bigger, so bigger I got. I speak for the trees have no tongues. There's a plaque on a park bench at Wild Lake that reads, "Beauty is free if you really plan to respect both the land and man." Jim Rouse, 1965. It's not what you look at that matters. It's what you see, said Henry David Thoreau. Or in the case of Longfellow, it's what we don't see anymore. Again, I quote from the Lorax. I am the Lorax who speaks for the trees, which you seem to be chopping as fast as you please, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot. Nothing is going to get better. It's not. A tree falls the way it leans. Be careful which way you lean. Thank you, and please, always speak up and protect our streams and ponds and watersheds. Don't be intimidated. I'm looking forward to a fresh start in the fall.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you. Next up, we have David Zinner, and he's joining us virtually. Welcome, David.
Thank you. My name is David Zinner. I've lived in Columbia for over 40 years. I love the videos of the CA events, but sadly you missed what happened last weekend, where my wife and I and a few of our friends partnered with CA to put on Coral Reef Encounter. Coral Reef Encounter is an art installation and immersive, fun, educational experience. For the third year, we put 300 fish into the Jeffers Hill pool. Okay, not real fish. They were handmade fish, and along with the coral we make from newspaper bags and rubber gloves, pool noodles, old CDs, you get the picture. And then we invite folks to sign up to snorkel through our reef. We had 1,000 adults and kids snorkel through our reef over 2 days. Many kids snorkeled through the trail 2, 3, 4, even 5 times. I should tell you that cooperation from the CA Aquatics Department was magnificent, and the lifeguards at Jeffers Hill were great to work with. Hopefully the 1,000 participants learned a little about protecting real coral reefs and the importance of protecting the environment. And on the topic of the environment, I only recently learned about CA's effort to do what is apparently called stream restoration, but I'm a little bit confused. I don't know the history, I'm not a scientist, but I don't see how cutting down trees will help with sediment in the lakes. Before the CA board agrees to move ahead with something so dramatic, I'd like to see real education and good communication to Columbia residents, both those who live in the impacted area, as well as those who walk and bike along the streams and ponds. From what I've read, stream restoration sounds more like environmental destruction. But thanks for the opportunity to speak out.
Thank you, David. Any questions? Thank you, David. Next up is Richard Bannister, and he's joining us virtually. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm going to start by quoting from the WSSI letter of April 14th, 2023, giving 2 reasons for removing Reach 1 from the Lake Alcorn project. Quote, functional uplift. Reach 1 is deeply incised, is in a narrow riparian area, and is separated from the lower stream reaches by Jackson Pond. Given these physical constraints, at this time, we do not feel the restoration of this reach would result in sufficient functional uplift that would just justify the construction impact. 2, construction impact. Given the degree of stream incision and limited work area, the restoration work would likely result in more construction impact than would be palatable for the residents that are near the stream in this location. End quote. Question. Shouldn't WSSI have known this even before they submitted their proposal to Columbia Association, let alone before they submitted the prospectus? Or did they simply submit their plans to CE and the IRT, hoping no one would notice and that the project would go through regardless, as did the restoration project in Longfellow? From the watershed management page on the CA website, quote, update. CA has been notified that WSSI intends to withdraw its application for the Lake Alcorn Bank due to significant and evolving regulatory uncertainties around the crediting process, end quote. Didn't WSSI know about the regulatory uncertainties before now, like at the beginning? How come staff chose this company that seems to have been leading CA on for the past 2 or 3 years? How come there have been so much misinformation, disinformation, and downright fictions coming from WSSI, CA management staff, and the Watershed Advisory Committee, much of which is still in circulation? This unnecessary project has taken considerable time and resources from the board, CA staff, and watchdog residents, and needs further investigation by the board as to the why and how it came about, and how it was conducted. Residents' annual charge pays for the upkeep and maintenance of open space. The annual charge also paid for this debacle, one that quite possibly has legal ramifications. In his welcoming speech to the incoming CA board, former board member Dick Bolton gave a piece of advice I'd like to echo and use it in regard to the Lake Alcorn project. Get your own counsel. And with that, I know you're all off for a while, so I'd like to wish you all a great vacation. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions? No, thank you. And then next up, we have Michael Gleibersuch, who's representing the Owen Brown Village Board. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks. I have a different perspective. So I'm here on behalf of Owen Brown to remind you that even though we don't show up to every meeting, there's a lot of people in Columbia that support the Lake Elkhorn Stream Restoration Project. As you know, CA has to dredge Lake Elkhorn every few years. These projects are lengthy, loud, require heavy machinery running in people's backyards for months on end, result in tree loss, are disruptive to wildlife, and close off portions of the path. In general, they're a pain in the neck for thousands of Owen Brown residents that we endure every few years. They're also expensive. They are, however, necessary to maintain the lake as a great feature in our community. Reducing the amount of sediment flowing into Lake Elkhorn from upstream could reduce the need to dredge, lower the frequency of these disruptive projects, and free money for CA to invest in other ways in the community. It'll also protect CA's path infrastructure and the properties of some residents from being swallowed by erosion. Personally, I don't have the background to claim authoritatively that stream restoration will succeed in reducing sediment buildup in the lake. Common sense tells me that restoring the floodplain and slowing the velocity of water in the channel will reduce erosion and reduce sediment buildup. But you don't need to listen to the opinions of lay people on this, because CA has employees with relevant experience and a watershed advisory committee with impressive expertise telling you this is a good project to pursue. Also, the nature of the stream bank provides an additional layer of oversight in the form of government regulators to provide assurance that the plans are likely to deliver their intended benefit and identify risks in the plans proposed by the contractor. As the previous speaker just highlighted, that was the process working. That oversight wouldn't be available for free if CA were to pursue stream restoration without a stream bank. It seems everyone agrees that the ideal solution would include reworking all the upstream outfalls where the water first enters the stream, but those are beyond CA's control, and the lack of an ideal solution shouldn't prevent you from taking practical steps in the right direction. Pretending the county's going to undertake the massive effort and expense to fix all those outfalls anytime in the next several decades is just kind of silly. As a nature lover who spends a ton of time biking through the Lake Elkhorn watershed and photographing its wildlife, I, of course, don't want to lose any of the trees. But that's a short-term downside outweighed by the long-term benefits of preventing further erosion in the watershed and sediment accumulation in Lake Elkhorn. I'm also sympathetic that the machinery needed to conduct the restoration will be disruptive to the people that live nearby. That needs to be taken in context with the disruptions that dredging Lake Elkhorn has on the people that live in that neighborhood every few years. It's important to remember that CA has been trying to address stream degradation and water management issues for years, maybe even decades. It's not as if CA is ignoring a bunch of other practical options and pushing forward with the first idea that's been laid out. In all these years, this is the only practical no-cost solution that's been identified. If this opportunity slips away, it'll be years, if ever, that another opportunity to address this problem for free becomes available. The message posted on your website regarding WSSI's intent to withdraw their application leaves a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm not clear if there's anything CA can do at this point to salvage the project. But if there is anything you can do to work with WSSI to keep the project moving forward, you should. That may mean altering the contract to extend the timeline to complete the work. And it would also probably help if CA unequivocally stated that you want this project to move forward, because the sentiments expressed by some board members over the last year have sent mixed signals to regulators, local and state politicians, residents, and WSSI themselves about whether you're actually committed to this project. Clearing up CA's position and just having a confusing position is bad for any organization. So clearing up your position, the position of your leadership, and clearly stating that this project is the right thing for our community may not address WSSI's uncertainties about the crediting process, but it certainly wouldn't hurt. So again, I want to remind you that even though we don't speak at every meeting, there are lots of people in the community that support this project and the benefits that it'll deliver, that residents of Owen Brown and visitors to Lake Elkhorn would benefit from reducing sediment buildup in the lake, and all of Columbia would benefit from the cost savings associated with the project. On a final note, I want to thank John McCoy in particular and the staff in general. They've been really proactive, engaging my board over the past several years. Like the idea that CA hasn't been reaching out to the community, that's not true. John came to our board on his own volition well before this ever got off the ground. So thank you to that, and being proactive in the way they've responded to our questions.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions? Eric?
Yeah, one question. So you talked about in your testimony that addressing the outfalls and having the county address the outfalls would be something that could help, but would be silly to expect that to happen. Could you elaborate on why do you think that is not a feasible solution?
Well, I mean, there's hundreds of them, right? I mean, I don't know. I agree with Sharon, right? Like the pink dots are the problem, but there's just, I don't know, hundreds of them, dozens of them. I've got to imagine that those things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix, right? I mean,
I'm not sure what the cost is. I don't know what the cost is, but if that is the solution, it seemed to me that working with the county to try to come up with the optimal solution, if that is the optimal solution, would seem to be the best way to go.
Yeah, but well, first of all, I don't think it is the optimal solution. It's the ideal solution, definitely not the optimal solution, because the optimal solution is actually making progress and pretending that you're going to be able to get the county to fix those things. Like, no, I don't believe that. As I said, you've been working on this. You've been working on watershed management issues for years. This isn't obviously the first time someone has said, well, maybe we should work with the county.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That concludes Resident Speak Out. I want to thank everyone for signing up tonight. And we'll take a 2-minute recess to allow staff to reconfigure.
Moving fast.
10 after. We'll be here 10 after.
That doesn't leave much time.
How are you? June 22nd. Approval appointments to the Climate Change and Sustainability Advisory Committee. Approval of the budget schedule for fiscal year 25. And approval of the Kingston Tyrants request for the fiscal year 23 exception to excess cash calculations. So they're all approved. Okay, next we are moving on to board votes, which is ethics panel and enforcement policy. Few minutes here. Okay. So we have recommendations from staff. Is there a motion to?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the draft ethics panel charter and policy for reporting violations as written.
Is there a second? Sky, I see your hand up there.
I second the motion.
All right, well, let's go into discussion first.
Point of information, does this include both the charter and the policy, or just the policy, or just the charter?
Charter and policy.
Charter and policy. Okay, thanks.
Hey, can I ask a question, a parliamentary question? So if we're making this motion now, is there discussion what happens to all the comments that we've made?
Yeah, that's what we're going to get to.
Okay, thank you.
In fact, that is the actually next thing.
Good. Just question also, because I don't know what was said, because now we're saying charter, but this says panel and policy. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing and we don't get into.
It was ethics panel charter. That's what's in the packet.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, Dennis.
So I would like to start with a philosophical statement that I don't take lightly. And that is that if the board as a body doesn't trust the president and CEO, you should get a new president and CEO. And that we're working together, we're on the same team. The board doesn't need its own general counsel, it doesn't need its own marketing department. If there's not that trust there, then the solution is not to get a separate council, it's to get a different president and CEO. So I want to make that general statement. I don't take that statement lightly, because I like my job, but I recognize that that's got to happen. And if there's not that trust there in everything that we do, that we're acting in the best interest of the association, then move on. With that being said, in terms of there was a vote in January to create a panel. That panel needs to be set up and to be ongoing. To think that you could get it together in a short time if something came up. The fire department, the best analogy I heard was the fire department doesn't try to gather itself into the firehouse around the fire trucks when there's a fire. They're already there, ready and waiting, and that's the same thing with the ethics panel. And I don't think that they can be something that can be brought, that if you have a problem, you need to have them waiting in the wings. In terms of, that who approves the panel, since the SLT would not be out there reviewing who the disinterested firms are. There are professional staff that would do it. And again, I would say that is a very much a staff issue, and it also would be, a trust issue. And then finally, the rehiring of any SLT member. The board hires the president. The president, everybody else works underneath the president. And so if there's some SLT member who is, who's taken out and not, whether or not they're rehired would then be up to the president, CEO, not a board function. So with that being said, Topper might have a.
Well, I think, Paul touched on a number of the comments that were made. There was one that hasn't been touched on, which I think kind of goes hand in glove, maybe. I'm not sure. There's a comment that a provision here conflicts with the charter, which I don't think it does, and maybe we should explore that, because I'm not sure. There's not a statement of how it conflicts with the charter, but a concern about the same provision was made that it disenfranchises the communities, the village associations, which it is not intended to do at all. We talked at the last meeting about a conflict with the charter, which we really pointed to the bylaw provisions, and that it would be a different vote, not the board. The board as members must remove. That's who acts to remove a board member. And we thought that was implicit in the way we wrote it last time. We made it explicit in response to that comment. If a village association renominates someone who's been removed, then we think the board has to put that person back on? Could that person be removed again, potentially? Could you get in a vicious loop? Perhaps. But at some point, I think the board has probably a duty in certain ethical situations to remove a truly unethical board member. And then there has to be a resolution with the village association that keeps renominating that person. Somehow that has to be resolved. And I don't think a policy can necessarily resolve that. So there's no intent to disenfranchise communities. The role of the village association is clear. In the charter, they're entitled to a representative on the board. And I think, our hope was we had sort of worked through that, and there still are comments, and we'd welcome hearing what people have, what concerns they have.
Karen, and then Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I think it totally disenfranchises the village. So if someone gets removed by the board for an ethical issue, no matter how small or how big, and the village understands that ethical issue and they renominate that person and the village goes to the polls and they vote for that person, that's who they want on the board, and a subsequent board should not have the power to then remove that person. And so until the policy takes that out, I personally will vote against it.
So you could find yourself then in a situation where the board is confronted with the village association continually sending that person back.
Yes.
Because it would happen over and over and over again.
Yes.
And the board would have to make a determination, either talk to the village community, share the concerns, but if you've got somebody who you have removed, there's a good reason. And the question, so look, you get to make this decision. I mean, it's a policy, and policies get revised, revisited all the time, and you can revisit this. I mean, you have to tell us what you think. I mean, you think someone is removed for really egregious ethical behavior, and the community wants to send them back. Should you have to sit that person?
Yes.
Okay. If that's the consensus of the board, that all we're doing is writing a policy. I think
the board has already done its job the first time it removes the person. They've worked with the village. If the village says we're okay.
Well, there isn't a circumstance, there isn't a policy that says we go to, I mean, the removal process is wrapped in confidentiality sometimes, and there are reasons. And one would think that once that person is sent back, you would consult with council and you would figure out some way to get back to the community and say, we have real reservations about this person. Let's try to figure it out.
But that would be on the first removal. That would be on the first removal. We would work with the villages. We would tell them what was going on.
Yeah.
However the legal authority advised us to do that. And if they then sat that person on the board again, if the village voted for them, then they get to be on the board.
So I guess I should have been a little clearer when I said violates the charter. So I was actually referring to lines 215 through 224. Again, with removing someone that's been re-elected, previously removed, re-elected. It talks about reconvening the board of directors to do the removal. That's actually against the charter. As I mentioned earlier, the charter is very clear that it's the members and all the members that have that decision and have that authority to do the removal. And so any policy that tries to change what the charter says would be in violation of it.
I'm not sure I understand. What is in violation of the charter?
When it basically says that such member decision will be voted on by the disinterested members of the board of directors. Well, the charter clearly states that it's the members of the corporation that have that authority for removal. It's the charter and bylaws.
It says that the board will convene as the members.
Actually, I mean, the bylaws, actually, it's actually the bylaws, Article 2, Section 2.03, that,
2.03
that discusses removal.
By the members. That would be a separate vote.
So that would be but this is not talking about a members meeting. It's talking about a board meeting and not the entire board. So 2.03 talks about a members, a meeting of a vote of the members.
Wait a minute. Oh, I wrote that they will meet as the members to consider removal. I mean, to me, that is absolutely clear. The board can recommend removal. That's what the board, but the board, under the bylaws, the members must remove.
Yeah,
so the board would meet again in its capacity as the members to vote to remove.
So I'm looking at 223, such decisions will be voted on by the disinterested members of the board of directors. That strikes me as that's not the members. That's the
the board has to take action
directors.
first as the board. The way this is intended to work, the board has to take action as the board. But the board cannot remove. The board could recommend removal. Then it has to go to the board in their capacity as the members, and that's who could remove.
So that's
if the board. So the board as the members in their capacity as the members of the corporation under 2.03 of the bylaws, I think it is, they have the power to remove this individual. This individual is now removed. If that individual is then resent by the village association, the board as the members must reseat that person. At that time, the board as the board, and we put this in because it could be later, it could be some period of time later and different board members. At that time, the members of the board of directors receive a copy of the report of findings and conclusions when that individual had been removed. Then the board will meet in closed session to consider whether removal again is appropriate or other corrective action is appropriate. And we could say a recommendation to the incorporated association that the individual be removed, because the association can remove as well. But the board should regroup and understand that the incorporated association has sent back to the board someone who the board made an affirmative decision should be excluded for ethical reasons. That's all. I think that's sort of where the staff came out, is that they want that meeting to happen.
So what's not clear is that seems to override section 2.03 that basically says that the members are the ones that meet and make the decision to remove.
The members are the board. They would meet. They can meet in their capacity as the board and take action. It's a different action to meet in their capacity as the members of the corporation. And then that's the action that would be the removal.
Because if we're meeting as the members, it's got to be a vote of all the members, not just the disinterested ones, because in the bylaws it says all the members.
Who would convene to vote?
Every member would vote.
Yeah,
all 10 members.
At the board. Well, one wonders whether a board member who's been excluded would vote as a member in the members meeting. That's not as legally clear. Clearly, at the board meeting, that individual has a conflict and shouldn't vote.
So I think this, personally, I think this adds a lot more confusion to what our bylaws and charter state. So my recommendation, which is why I put it in, is to strike lines 215 through 224.
Strike the paragraph entirely?
Yeah.
I just want to be clear. I don't think we've identified how it conflicts with the charter. That's all I want to. I just don't understand yet. I mean, this group gets to decide what its policy is. That's fine, but I don't think this conflicts with the charter.
I mean, it seems like we're taking like 3 or 4 different votes here. I mean, you vote to put them on.
You have to take 2 different votes. This board does not have authority to remove the members of the corporation.
Yes.
And this is where, lawyers live and, I mean, just, this is what we do. So I know it's not intuitive, but in a non-stock corporation, you can have members. When you don't have members, the board acts as the members. The bylaws of this organization say the members may remove a board member. It doesn't say that the board may remove a board member. So that's in two different functions that you have to operate. When you elect the board, you do that in your capacity as the members.
Yes.
The board doesn't, the board can fill vacancies in certain circumstances, but you're acting as the members when you elect the board. You're acting as the members if you remove a board member. And in an ethical situation, that's how you would act. But there's no conflict with the charter. That's, I just, unless you're thinking of something that I don't see.
I mean, again, so the reason why it's complicated is it's not clear to me when I read this paragraph that it's a meeting of the members that's taking place. It strikes me as you've got multiple meetings of the board of directors when I read this paragraph. And so my concern, one of many concerns, is this can lead to a lot of confusion down the road. Because to someone just reading this without any knowledge of the charter or limited knowledge of the charter and bylaws, they say, oh, we'll have a meeting of the board. All the disinterested members can't vote. And so now 2/3 of the remaining members are voting to remove someone, and that's it. There's no future meeting of the members to do that removal. So if someone were to just read this without going through the charter and bylaws, so I think this creates more confusion than it's worth, and I think it can lead to some issues. So that's why I would make an amendment to move to strike 215 through 224.
I would second that.
Sky has her hand up.
Okay, Sky and then Susan. And Alan.
Yeah, I think I'm answering my question as I listen more, but the village elects a representative, and that representative is a member of the Columbia Council. Then the Columbia Council appoints itself as the board of directors. When you're talking about members of the corporation, are you referring to members of the Columbia Council?
So forgive me, because I'd have to go look at the charter. The representatives sent by the incorporated associations are referred to, I think, in the charter as the Columbia Council. But the direct, so it may be one and the same, but the directors, if that's who acts to elect the board of directors, then those are the members of the corporation.
Could I answer those guys?
So I'm wondering if a board member is removed and the village re-elects or appoints him to the Columbia Council, if then the Columbia Council could refuse to seat that person on the board of directors.
I think the charter says you shall put that individual on the board.
Yep.
Yes.
That's why we go back. And the board is who will have the institutional memory of the ethical challenge. I mean, is it fathomable that this becomes a problem? I'd be surprised, but we started with the permanent ban. That was not received favorably by this board at the prior meeting. We talked about the difference between the board acting as the board and the board acting as the members. And I thought we had clarified that, and perhaps we haven't made it as clear as I thought in terms of that distinction. But we got rid of the permanent ban, and we made it clear that if someone who has had severe ethical challenges comes back to this board should be made aware of it. And it might be several generations of board members later. This board should be made aware of it. I mean, that's sort of the consensus feeling, I think, among at least, the staff. Okay. And I thought
Let's go with Susan and Alan and then Carol. And then Reg.
I had my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Write these down. All right. We'll do Susan, Alan, Bill.
Thank you.
I was just
With me.
reflecting that I can't imagine a circumstance in which someone would attempt to enforce the situation, or enforce the situation to make a move to that the majority of the board would act without an understanding of the bylaws and the charter, or without legal counsel in this matter, because it would be so serious. So I don't know that that concern would occur in reality.
All right. Alan?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things. First of all, Dennis, I want to respond to your opening comment. I see trust and agreement as two different things. So I just want to say for myself, I have absolute trust in you and your commitment to CA. And that doesn't mean I'm always going to agree with you. So to me, it's not a question of trust. And I would hope that disagreement doesn't get equated to distrust.
Agreed.
And as to the fire department analogy, I understand the analogy. I understand the wish to have something there, but a fire kills in moments. Ethics policies, as we've seen, drag out, ethics infraction investigations drag out over a period of time, even when they're done with alacrity. So I don't think that analogy really necessarily holds up. And I would renew my point from before that I'm not sure lawyers are the best people to be, necessarily the best people to be judging ethics infractions. Speaking to our attorney, I get that the intent was not to disenfranchise villages, but intent is never the issue in these cases, it's the impact. And so I think we need to pay attention to the impact and not talk about intent, because intent gets lost when impact is different than what the intention was. I would agree with Eric that, well, first of all, to Sky, to your point, there are actually three ways that we all sit. We are all the Columbia Council, we are all the members of CA, and we are all the board of directors of CA. Those are three different entities. The members are not the board. The members happen to have the same people as the board, but the members of CA are not the board. And I would agree with Eric that because only members of CA can vote to remove a director of CA, all 10 members of CA ought to be able to vote. And lastly, a question for our attorney. You said if there's a conflict, the person shouldn't vote. I'd like to, I know we've gone round and round on this a little bit. I'm still confused as to the difference between shouldn't vote and should recuse themselves, which puts, shouldn't vote puts the onus on the chair to deny them the vote. Should recuse themselves puts the onus on the person to recuse themselves. And I'm wondering, you use the phrase shouldn't vote, and I'm just wondering whether you meant that difference.
I'm not certain that the chair has the authority to require someone to recuse himself or herself. You can have a policy. If a board member has a conflict of interest, that board member has a duty under common law to acknowledge it, share it, and then the law is unclear, but you hope that a board member, subject to the duties of a board member, has sufficient respect for the other board members that he or she says, I won't vote. I have a conflict of interest, I won't vote. For the matter to be approved, untainted by that conflict, it has to be approved by a majority of the board members, excluding that person. Whether or not he or she chooses to vote, a majority of the disinterested board members have to approve the if it's a transaction, if it's a contract, if it's a matter. That's the way to cleanse the conflict of interest. It has to be disclosed, and a majority of the disinterested board members have to approve it. So it's the acknowledgement and the disclosure of the conflict that is the clearest. There is no clear authority that you have to recuse yourself. You can have a policy that says when you will and when you won't, and you should. Not-for-profit organizations have to report to the IRS that they have a conflicts of interest policy. And I've never seen one that didn't say someone with a conflict shouldn't vote, shouldn't participate in the deliberation. But that's the way it is. The vote of the members is a different vote. A member of a corporation is subject to a different standard. A member doesn't have the fiduciary-like duties of a board member. And arguably, a member could participate in that vote. The required vote under the charter, it's in the bylaws, the required vote to remove is, I think, 2/3 of the votes entitled to be cast. That means the number of members. So if you don't vote there, it's the same thing as a vote against, because you have to get a different standard to remove. So I'm not certain I'm answering the question, but as a member, I guess I am an optimist. One hopes a member has respect for fellow members sufficient to say, I've clearly got a conflict here, I'm not going to vote. But that's not a legal.
You did answer.
All right,
thank you.
Anything else, Alan?
Point of order, could you repeat the amendment? I think there's an amendment on the floor, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. To strike, I move to strike 215 through 224.
And I second that.
The lines.
When I looked at 215 to 224, it was part of an intake form.
It's part of
what? What am I missing?
No, it's not. It's part of the. It's part of the chart.
It's under
part of the policy, I think.
Part of the policy. It's part of the policy under attachment B, page 5.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bill, Karen, and Reg. Bill.
Okay, couple of things. First of all, I think that we are doing a whole lot of unlearning months of discussion here. When discussing the complainant and the accused and the ability to vote, we have gone over this many times, that it is a conflict of interest for either of those parties to also deliberate and vote on the outcome of whatever is before the rest of the members, the board, the council. That is a conflict. We've been through this many, many times. We have at great lengths dragged our heels and learned this lesson, and tonight we're calling it back into question, and I think that is very dangerous. We cannot be accusers and sit on a jury, or defendants and sit on a jury. That's a conflict. Let's all just remember that, please. Going on with respect to the removal of a member and then their ability to come back on this board, we need to weigh a few things that I think are not in evidence so far. First would be, how remote is this scenario? And it seems to me that it's not going to happen very often, that we get this condition. Secondly, as we discuss this, we need to understand that given the parameters we've set with an ethics panel, a vote of the full board, if someone has been removed, this must have been something so egregious that coming back, regardless of where the vote of the village is, would be detrimental to the company. And you need to weigh the risk of that person being back on the board, somebody who is stolen from the corporation, somebody that has engaged in harassing other board members or other staff, people who have done something that is very concerning with the vote of the people. And that's what the balance needs to be. It's not just, well, this is an Etch-a-Sketch, new election, the slate is wiped clean. This is something that is really, really serious. And we are 45 minutes out, I think, from when we had residents here saying all kinds of lovely things that Jim Rouse said. And Rouse had something to do with this charter and bylaws. And to construe them now to justify putting thieves and misogynists and bigots on this board is wrong. You can't be on the side of those people. That's what we're talking about here.
Karen, and then,
Chair, we've got 14 seconds left. Do you want to add time?
yeah, let's add another 10 minutes.
So I just want to say something to Bill. I think that people have been removed for very minor infractions previously. So I think that the ethics policy last year, the ethics whatever, was abused. And a lot of people on this board were subject of that. And we keep saying this is a remote possibility. This document, the board gives up a lot of power. I think that's ridiculous. If the villages want to vote for somebody after you've gone and talked to them, if you want to go and scream to the hills that their person is a misogynist, that's up to you, Bill. But I think that with what happened last year, I think that this document, we haven't learned anything. We haven't learned anything. I'm not comfortable voting for this. As long as it says that we have to continue to remove members, I don't like that at all.
It does not say you have to continue to remove members.
Well, it basically does. I mean, you said it's not a ban. You said you took out a permanent ban. This actually gets to my question is, you said you took out a permanent ban, but then you guys basically added it back in by then re-reviewing the issue again and again with subsequent boards to make sure that they continue to remove that person even if they're elected.
So if, it's your policy, it's not mine. But this creates a mechanism for a new board to be aware of something it might not otherwise be aware of. That's all.
And Karen, I wasn't saying that I would say it's a misogynist. I'm saying that a panel conducting an investigation and evaluating the results of that investigation, making a recommendation to the board, and then the full board that's able to vote on it said the person was a misogynist. I didn't say it. It would be a result of the process. And then to bring that person, after all of that validation, back onto this board, no questions asked, is just, I don't even have words. So it's the process that would say it. It's not me. It's the process.
Rich.
So I have witnessed members of this board previous who have been told that they, considered being thrown off because for various reasons. And some of the reasons, as Karen said, wasn't very, it wasn't something illegal, wasn't something real bad. It's just.
The board.
I'm sorry?
No, sorry, this is just feedback.
I hit my touchpad by mistake. My apologies.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. So go back to where I was. However, my assumption is, according to this, that for us right now, in the state of our affairs as a board, if we were to consider throwing someone off or removing them, I won't say throwing off, but removing them, I would assume that we're doing it because they have done something grievously wrong. Okay, and that's what I would hope. But again, I have seen in the past where it's not that. But say that we decide to remove someone, my concern is once we've removed it, if that village board, because I'm telling you, because I remember from, again, when it's happened before, that the chair hightailed it straight over to that village and said, hey, this is why we want to remove this person, this is why we're removing them, that village board would take it very seriously. Now, if that village board, after seriously considering that, says, you know what? We don't think this person did that, or it's not that serious of a thing that we don't want this person to represent us. And they elect this individual again, which we've seen happen. And someone asked me the other day, who am I to tell him and his village that they can't have their representative? Now, I do agree that, when that person comes back, we're all going to vote. I mean, because we're going to vote on each one of us to see if we're going to be a part of the, of our group. I got that. But I think we need to be very serious here. One, to make sure that, we're not just using for political reasons or just good to get back at someone. That's why we're going to throw someone off, because it's a very serious matter. And then secondly, if a village comes back and says, I want this person, they have that right. They have that right. And the other thing, I heard I think you said this, I'm not sure whether you meant it, but let's say you said something about, time later and time later. Okay, so does that mean every time this person comes up for an election, we immediately go and consider that? When does this person pardoned? It just seems like it's a continual punishment. But again, it's if that village wants that person to go forward, again, who are we? Second, the other thing I want to point out, and maybe it was, you said it accidentally, but you said the staff wants this. I think you meant to say the staff and board wants this. I was hoping that that's what you meant.
But I didn't intend to say what the staff wants. I intend to say what my firm and the staff worked on to try to be responsive to comments made at the last meeting. I got you, sir. And I'm trying to respond to comments that were made, which were, one, it conflicts with the charter. I'm confident that it doesn't, and two, that it disenfranchises village associations, and I'm saying it doesn't.
So let me go back to what I was saying. So that what I heard you say, and I'm just hoping you said it by mistake, because I don't think that's what you meant to say. Because I think what we want to say was that we think that this is a good policy, and this is the way we want to go forward. I don't want anybody to think that, hey, so we put one body against the other body. We're one body. The board and the staff, we're together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just want to keep that there.
Board decision.
That's what I want to keep, the way it's supposed to be. And again, all I'm looking for is that, hey, if we take the very serious point of removing somebody, it's got to be for something really serious. And if it is, and we remove that person, again, like Andy, and I've seen it, Andy will go straight to that village board and say, hey, this is what happened, and you need to remove this person, don't bring him back. If that village board says he's coming back, at least we'll vote on it and take a look, but we've got to consider.
All this says is that you'll take a look.
That's okay.
That is the purpose of this.
Eric and then Bill.
So I think the confusion I've got is actually on line 223. Such decisions will be voted on by the interested members of the board of directors. What are those decisions? Because there's above it, we talk about having reconvening boards, and as soon as possible, the board will convene a special session to consider removal. Such decisions, what are the decisions taking place? Because I read it and I say that I see the decisions as removal, which would be in conflict with our bylaws and charter. But I'm not, based on the discussion, based on what I've been hearing, I'm not sure if that's the right interpretation of what those decisions entail. So could you elaborate in line 223, what are the decisions that would be considered by the interested members?
So the board recommend, if the board's corrective action for an ethical violation is removal, the board, as we've discussed, does not have the power to remove. That goes to the board in their capacity as the members, and this would be exactly the same situation. And you could remove from 222 the words removal of the individual from the board of directors and you could simply say the board's going to meet to consider whether corrective action is appropriate. That's the point, is to inform the board, because it could be a different generation of a board that needs to know, and the board should make a decision, because no one else necessarily looks out for the fiduciary component of the board than the board. But the board would not have the power to remove. I think we've been through that.
We've been through that. I'm just trying to clean this up a bit.
Okay, so if I can just, haven't had a chance yet.
I've got my hand up.
What I'm hearing is, we serve as members and we serve as directors. We just have to be the same people. But as members, we have certain powers. As directors, we have certain powers and responsibilities. As directors, we can make recommendations to the members. So the directors themselves, as directors, do not have the ability to remove a director. The directors, as directors, do not have the ability to appoint another director. Both of those powers reside solely with the members. Okay, so at most, what the board of directors can do is make a recommendation to the members of the corporation, and then the members of the corporation have to make whatever decision they want, whether to add or remove a person. And that's what I hear from the lawyers. So, sorry. That's my understanding. So just want to make sure we do get it. It is sometimes a little difficult because we wear two hats. We can do certain things as members and certain things as directors. And from what I'm gathering, when you're a director, you do have fiduciary responsibilities, but also you get to see the documentation because you're all bound. When you're a member, you don't have that authority. You don't have that. So that's one of the differences between being a director and being a member. All right, but Bill has next.
I just had a question about what you were saying, Andy.
Really quickly, do you want to add another 10 minutes?
Sure. We'll do Bill and Alan, and then.
I actually had a question specifically about what you were saying.
Yeah.
A question. This is a meeting of the directors, correct? This is not a meeting of the members.
It's not a meeting of the members.
Thank you.
No. Meetings and members is actually special requirements how we do this. At the moment, the only meeting of members we have had was in May.
Right.
The first meeting in May was the members, and what did we do? We elected the directors.
Right.
And what our charter said is we have to elect whoever the village says to us, and that's what this thing says too. So we are bound as members to elect whoever the village sends us as a director. Okay, Bill, Alan.
All right. I just wanted to bring a little balance to the discussion here. We've talked a lot about we better have a really good reason for removing a member. I also want to say that there have also been arguments on the other side that saying that any cases that are brought before the ethics panel and then reviewed by the board of directors, we want to ensure that there isn't any early dismissal of something that is serious in nature. And we want to make sure that not only do we have a good reason for removing people, we're also making sure that all serious cases are treated with care and carried out to the fullest. So I just want to make sure we're looking at both sides of this.
Alan?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that a couple of things. Bill, I'm in complete agreement with you that I'd be horrified if convicted child molesters, et cetera, became returned board members. But I have pretty great trust in the citizens of Columbia that they wouldn't vote for that to happen. But as Karen has pointed out, the actual removals that we've had have been for much more de minimis kinds of things, nothing anywhere close to the nature that you're describing. I also just want to, again, to our attorney, this is the second time you've talked about the board in its capacity as members. The board does not have a capacity of members as members. These 10 individuals have a capacity as board. These 10 individuals have a capacity as members, but the board does not have a capacity as members. And I think it's important that we keep those distinctions really, really clear. What I don't see
That is correct. That is correct.
Thank you. What I don't see in this section that is the subject of this amendment is any mention of the members. Is this contemplating that simply that the sort of in the normal course of events, the members would agree to? I don't see the handoff between the board and the members anywhere in this. Could you point me to it, or is it just implied?
I did not. It is of necessity that if the individual is put back on the board, it is done by the members at the nomination of the village association. So that has happened when that person is put back on the board.
I'm not quite sure I got that, but
No, well, I'm sorry. So the policy addresses a situation where a board member has been removed, a board member has been nominated by the village association's board of directors as their council representative to come back on the board again. The board, these individuals in their capacity as members must put that person back on the board. That's now that has been accomplished. We're at a time when that's been accomplished. What should this board, these individuals in their capacity as a board, do? Those who might not be aware of the situation should be made aware of it. The circumstances should be shared with the board. And the board, as a board, subject to their legal duties as directors of a corporation, should consider whether corrective action is appropriate or not. It's not a permanent ban.
okay, I get that.
It's not a
I get that, but then does the corrective action, I don't see where the only way the corrective action could be taken is by the members again.
No.
So I don't see the handoff back to the members.
I don't know what corrective actions short of removal might be, but I don't know what this board has ever done. Boards have.
Well, I guess you're right. In the case of removal, it would have to go back to the members.
It would be a recommendation from the board back to the members yet again. Yes.
Okay. And that's not mentioned there, but that's implied. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on, I got one. All right. Sorry, Bill.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
So, I'm kind of lost here a little bit, so help me out. Are we voting for this in piece or is in one piece? I'm trying to get whether I'm kind of lost here. Are we voting for this as an entire ethics statement, or are we doing a piecemeal?
At the moment, the motion was both the charter, approval of the charter and approval of the.
But point of order, I believe there's an amendment.
So I'm just trying to.
Subject to one amendment.
Amendment on the floor.
Right.
Yeah, I was getting lost as to what we're voting on.
So currently on the floor is the amendment.
Right. So the amendment is to remove under the policy, let's see, go to the policy, page 5, lines 215 to 224, correct?
Yes.
That's what the amendment is. So is there any more discussion?
Keith has one.
Keith has a question.
I just wanted to ask, are there a number of amendments that we're going to be considering through this? Because I heard at one point if this was in here, wouldn't vote for it, but I didn't know if there were other circumstances that people feel that we're going to be, debating amendments that are that serious. When I say that serious, I mean that impactful to a vote. Are there other amendments that people are considering that are that significant?
There are 17 items on the spreadsheet that
I didn't ask if there were 17 items. I asked if there were there are potential amendments that are that significant. And the reason why I'm asking is in the last board session, I sat here and just witnessed us systematically unwind 2 years worth of work, one vote after another. So. For instance, I'll tell you my position. I agree, Reg and Karen, and with the idea that if we really get to that point where we get in this debacle of people going back and forth and all that, I don't really want any business of trying to remove them again. If people want them here, bring it on. If they violate the ethics policy again, then we go through that process and we move forward. I don't think that the significant things that you were talking about, because they're legal issues, the person's going to be in jail or otherwise, because presumably those are going to be matters that are going to be referred. So the reason why I'm concerned is because of what I saw in the last session of the board, where, again, we systematically unwound all of the work that had been done. And if that's where we're headed, then that makes it really difficult for me to vote amendment by amendment. If I would vote to strike this piece here, right? Because of exactly what you said, Bill, the likelihood of this occurring is so slim that whether it's in there, it's unlikely, whether it's out of there, it's unlikely, and I'm comfortable with, striking it and I can move forward. But I just need to have a sense from the rest of the board if there are other major issues like this that we're going to be undermining, and I consider to be undermining the ethics documents.
Eric, you got
Well, I think there are several major issues. I don't think it's undermining, and I think people have, looking at what people have commented on, I think people have significant concerns, and that's why we're here, is to debate those concerns.
Right. And again, I'm fine with concerns. I'm just trying to understand and make sure that the list of concerns are not a systematic way to undermine the work that's been done. And I'm not going to ask for an answer on that. I'm just telling you my position based upon my experience from the last session.
I mean, if you're wondering, there's not going to be an amendment to delete 1, then delete 2, then delete 3, if that's what you're wondering.
Well, we got rid of, in the last session, we got rid of the ethics panel systematically. We pretended that there were other issues around segments of the policy, but really what was going on is we removed ethics panel in this one without discussing it. We removed it here, we removed it here, we removed it here, we removed it here. And I don't want to get played with that way. I'd rather just be upfront and have a conversation and then, call it a spade. So I'm good. I just wanted to say my piece. And I could vote to take this out if this is one of the big sticking points. I don't have an issue with it one way or the other.
So that's what I was trying to figure out is where are we going? What are we doing?
I mean, I was hoping we were going to vote on this tonight. We have the policy. I think what we do is take the amendment policy, and then I would like to move to a vote on the actual charter and policy. I mean, that's what I'd like to do. We can take this amendment and then call the question and move to the vote. And Bill?
Mr. Chairman, before we get to the vote, I just wanted to bring up, I was trying to do this at the top, but it got lost, and my apologies to my good friends on the audit committee. As everybody knows, the audit committee is charged by the CA board to also monitor and oversee the ethics portion of the corporation. The audit committee met last night and reviewed the policy and the charter that we are discussing here. And after reviewing the policy, we came up with the following statement, and I think you should all know. The audit committee appreciates the board's work to create the draft ethics panel charter and the policy for reporting violations of the Code of Business Conduct and policies and recommendations that the board, and recommends that the board approve the charter and policies as presented in the July 27th, 2023 board packet and implement the ethics panel and policies without delay. So just to let you know, I'll pass out, if I fumbled that up, I pass out hard copies there for you guys to have. The panel did take a look, discussed this at length, and believes that what was here as written is a sound policy and would be coincident with good ethics in this corporation. So just a heads up on that.
All right, let me call the vote on the amendment. We move on. So the amendment is to remove lines 215 to 224 in the enforcement policy. Karen?
Yes, yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Bill?
No.
Lynn?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sky?
No.
Alan?
Yes.
And me, I vote no. So, but the amendment passes.
He votes no.
Votes no.
Right, so we take that language out. All right, I would like to call the question on the charter and the...
Or we're not going to review the other items? I mean, I'm sorry to pick at it, but I thought there were still other serious items that people had commented. I don't need to go over the things where I said, the things where I added about having, let's not even have a panel unless it's absolutely needed, and the board will just form it as needed. I get the challenges around that, so I'm willing to skip that, but I think Eric had other things that he wanted to review.
What else did you want, Eric?
Couple things. One, I'm given that this is a sort of a quick amendment, but given that we vote to remove 215 through 224, I think it'd also be appropriate to move 212 and 213. This is duplicative of our policies, and in the case of the senior leadership team, it's the CEO's decision both ways. So I think these two lines are not really doing anything. So I move to remove 212 and 213 from section D, page 5.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. So when we say this says if an employee is terminated, it's the CA, it's the president who makes this decision. So this is a problem for the board? Is that what it is? Because that's what it, I mean, this is, I'll go back to Keith. What we seem to be doing is unwinding.
No, this is just restating what we already do. Just restating the process. So it's just duplicative.
You're saying you're okay with leaving it, but why have it in here if it already is assumed?
Yeah.
So it's good.
All right, well.
Call the vote?
Yeah, I'll call the vote. So it's removing lines 212 and 213. I'll start with Chris.
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Bill?
Nope.
Eric?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Sky?
No.
And I vote no, so the amendment fails. All right, what else you have? 5-5.
Oh, 5-5? Okay.
Yep. 5-5. Okay, anything else?
So on the charter line 17, this board is a committee of the board. I believe all committees of the board are approved by the board, and so I just want to add to line 17 that the disinterested law firm shall be approved by the board.
It's not a committee of the board.
It's not.
No. Committee of the board is board members. You could have advisory members of a committee who are not members of a board, but a committee of a board is a subset of the board.
Well, it's a committee created by the board, and
It's a group created by the board. It's not, by passing this charter, but it is not a committee of the board. Just for clarity, sorry.
What can we add in there that we wanted to report to the board?
Well, they do in certain circumstances. You can get advisory opinions from them. But do they report to the board? Do they report to the audit committee? It depends on what they're doing. With luck, they have nothing to do.
What the complaint is, I guess?
I'm sorry?
Like what the complaint is? I mean,
so even the advisory committees, we approve those members.
Wait a minute. That's not what what this says is we're going to have disinterested law firms that will be chosen according to our procurement process. Just like we do when we hire other lawyers. So what is your amendment? I'm not sure.
My amendment is that the law firms that are chosen are approved by the board and also shall not serve more than one term in a row.
That's fair.
So I'll combine 1 and 2. And the reason why I bring up 2, that they shouldn't serve more than 1, 2, is the same reason why we change out our auditor every 5 years. So one of the reasons why we change out our auditor is to make sure that there's independence. And this charter clearly states that independence is important. So like we change out our auditing firm every 5 years to make sure there's...
We don't do it every 5 years. It's up for rebid every 5 years, but they don't have to change.
They don't?
No,
I thought they did.
no.
So we haven't been changing them?
We do.
We
Because
did.
new people have won the bid.
Okay.
The audit partner has to change, but not the auditor.
Well, the
difference between the firm and the partner.
Okay. The partner has to change. So again, given that analogy, I would say that at the very least, the members have to change every term.
Bill?
Okay, it seems like there were 3 changes in there. I'm not clear on which change we're talking about. But I'd also like to say that, and my apologies because I know them best, I go back to the Aquatics Advisory Panel. And we certainly have a lot of good things that the Aquatic Advisory Panel looks at, but we're never going to put them in charge of the safety training program for the lifeguards. This is kind of at that level for me here. It's the safety ethics training. You know, this is something that should be put through the procurement process. Eric said that this panel should be independent, and then also said that the board should be the one that's making the decision, which would not make them independent.
No, it's both. No. They're two. The board is approving a decision made by the procurement process, so it's just an approval.
But we don't approve all procurements. That's an entree into quite a bit there.
We approve some.
Which ones? Like?
The search firm.
Dennis, do you have anything to add?
So I go back and say that it's a staff function that there's no reason for the board. I can't imagine also how long it would take in meetings. What I suggest is that the staff would bring back the names of the firms that win through the procurement process to the board. And if for some reason the board took issue with one or more of the firms that were selected, they could make a decision at that time. But I don't see that generally that this is something the board would want to get involved in, and it would bog down the process. I certainly wouldn't want to do that every year.
No, this would be every 5 years.
Okay, I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, this is a new process. We're hoping to make it a more professional, disengaged process, one that we can rely on. I think it's unrealistic to expect to change it, the composition of the board every year. They may never even meet. I think it would be very hard to get members to be a member of a board that, again, may not have a function.
I think it says they have to meet annually, doesn't it? I think the charter, I think the charter says they have to meet annually.
They would review the conflicts questionnaires once a year.
No. With the audit committee, I think.
For the audit committee.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
By the way, Karen, did you second Eric?
Oh, say the motion again, I'm sorry.
Wanted to add on line 17, by a distinguished law firm approved by the board and served one term.
You mean disinterested? I second that.
All right. Anything? I would say Alan and then Sky.
Well, I have a related but different amendment I want to offer, so if you could come back to me when we're done with this part.
Sky?
Yeah, it's best to have a motion include only one issue rather than a two-part motion. But could you repeat the motion again? I couldn't hear the second part.
Okay.
The motion is on the charter, line 17, after the term disinterested law firm add approved by the board and serve for one term, serve for one term, which is the 5
One term of 5 years.
One forever or for, I'm not sure I understand. I just want to make sure you get words that are clear.
Eric?
So basically you'd have a firm, they'd serve for 5 years. The board would have to approve that, and then after 5 years, you would rebid, and just like we do with the auditing firm, go through the same process.
But the auditing firm could win again.
Yeah, but at the very least, they would have to replace the. At the very least, they should replace the principals on the committee.
On the panel.
On the panel, yes.
I'm not a member of the board, but my question is why?
It's basically, I'm trying to sort of follow what we do with the auditing and try to maintain the same level of independence.
The lawyers aren't subject to the same rules as CPAs, and that's to ensure the integrity of an audit. It's a very, very specific set of rules. The ethical rules of lawyers, they would be subject to the ethical rules of lawyers in the state of Maryland, every one of them. I'm not on the board, sorry. This is the board's role is oversight. The board's role is not management. You jeopardize sort of the indemnification provisions and the exculpation of board members when you are not acting as board members. There's a level.
So I'll revise the amendment because it seems like it's too complicated. So basically, I'll make the amendment to say the district law firm shall be approved by the board, and that would occur. I think it already says that term is 5 years, so that would occur every 5 years anyway. So just make it each term shall be approved by the board. So that's simple. That should simplify it.
It's just down. Is that okay?
Yeah, I second that.
All right, so the amendment is just disinterested law firm approved by the board. Sky, did you want to say anything? Or? Okay.
So I've got a question here. So I just need to understand here, and forgive me, I'm a soldier, not a lawyer. So I have no idea when I'm, picking a law firm. So I'm kind of wondering, how are we going to, I just want to know the mechanics. How are we going to pick the law firm that's going to do this? It kind of escapes me, I'm sorry.
We don't pick. That goes through the procurement process, but we'd have the
We approve it.
We'll
You're
approve.
asking us to approve it, right?
We'd have to approve it, yes.
So you're basically picking, but, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little wordy to say we're not picking. I mean, because if it's going to go to the board vote, the board is going to choose. I mean, that's exactly what a board vote is.
Yeah.
I just think that for this situation, part of this whole ethics charter, this whole ethics panel was to get the board out of the middle of this and only bring us in at the recommendation stage, not the. And so what I see here is they're trying to put the board back in, and I'm thinking like, oh yeah. And so then we're going to get into an argument over the 3 law firms. It's exactly what's going to happen. The board's got to get out of this. That's the problem. The board has got to get out of this stuff and just go with an independent set of folks. And I'm going to call the question on the amendment.
I've got a quick question before we do that. I mean, how does the county do this? I mean, the county's got ethics panels.
Yeah, well, no, we're not the county. I'm trying very hard to get the board out of this. All right, I'm going to call the question. Karen?
Yes.
Reg?
No.
Keith?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Bill?
No.
Lynn?
No.
Chris?
No.
Alan?
No.
Sky?
No.
Andy? No. All right, motion fails. Anything else?
I think.
I have a motion.
Yes.
I have an amendment.
Yeah, I'm just asking if Eric.
I got one more thing, but I'll let Alan go first.
Alan?
Yeah, I move that we add the words in line 25 in that same paragraph at the very end before the period, and for the 12 months following their tenure. My reasoning being that it keeps the firm from, it maintains their disinterest, it keeps them from using this as a way to finagle themselves in to get business with CA.
So could you restate that? Because I don't think I caught it all.
Could you read the whole sentence with the inclusion?
It's a long sentence. The attorney must be admitted to the practice of law in the state of Maryland and shall not have participated in the delivery of legal services to CA or a party adverse to CA in the 12 months immediately preceding their appointment to the ethics panel or for the duration of their tenure on the panel and 12 months thereafter. So it says when they get off the panel, just like we can't have a revolving door, they can't just then go do business with CA. The firm has to stay out of CA business for that year after.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not certain that works. If a lawyers move firms, firms have clients, firms have conflicts all the time, and often in order to resolve an ethical conflict under the rules, a firm must terminate the representation of a client. There's nothing that contemplates an ability for a client to hold a firm preclude a firm from representing someone else for a period of time after the lawyer's representation of the client terminates. There are rules about what that lawyer can do with information that he or she might have gathered. There are rules within firms that certain lawyers must be walled off if they have information that could be used in a way that's adverse to a former client. There are lots of ethical rules about what you can't do with respect to former clients. But you will never get a firm to serve in this role if you say, oh, and by the way, if you ever terminate in this role, you can't be adverse to us in any way for 12 months.
Oh,
you can.
Thank you. No, I really wasn't focusing on the adverse part. I was focusing more. Thank you for that. I was overlooking that. I don't know what the wording would be, but I was really thinking about doing work for CA, not work against CA. Obviously, we
I see.
Prevent them from doing.
Apologies. I
work against.
On a train unnecessarily. So.
No, thank you. That you've made my intent clear.
So the attorney may not participate in the delivery of services to Columbia Association for 12 months after his or her
after their service on the panel. Yes.
And would you exclude his or her firm as well?
Yes, that's what we're saying. For 12 months prior to their service, they have to be a disinterested firm and remain a disinterested firm and not use this opportunity as a way to get involved with CA.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a different way to solve for that, because firms have lawyers who come and go all the time. And a lawyer might arrive at my firm in a way that creates a conflict that would require me to withdraw from the representation of Columbia Association. And
well, wouldn't that be true of the 12 months preceding clause as well?
No, when I applied for, when Dennis called me and said, you're the only firm in the Baltimore, Washington area who's never represented Columbia Association, which it may be a hard one for him to find, but he calls my firm and he says, the reason you're the only one is because in the past 12 months, I haven't used you, is what he would say. That he can control and that he can diligence pretty easily. He would say, has anyone look at your firm, has your firm or anyone in your firm done anything for Columbia Association, and he knows who his firms are, in the last 12 months. That's controllable. And my firm might be disqualified for a 12-month period because of something we had done on behalf of Columbia Association. So that's easily managed. I don't think the time period after the service is manageable. I don't think you'll get a firm who would be interested. That's an overstatement. I'm sure you'd get a firm who's interested. I think it would create some real challenges for some highly qualified firms who would say, I can't tell you who I'm going to hire laterally tomorrow. I can't tell you who my firm might combine with. So, I can't foreclose the possibility of anyone in my firm doing work for Columbia Association for 12 months after the termination of my participation in that role. So I'm on the fly trying to think of another solution, because you don't want the person taking advantage of participation on the ethics panel to turn it into future work. And
exactly,
I don't have a solution for that. I don't have a solution.
Well, thank you for addressing it. But I also realized I didn't hear. But did anybody second my amendment? Because
no,
if they didn't,
I'll second it.
Wasting time for no reason.
I'll second it.
Eric said he seconded. Alan, do you still want to go ahead with your amendment?
I want to go ahead. Yeah.
All right. Bill?
Just looking at the paragraph that we're talking about in this light, you have an exclusion period of 12 months prior. There's a 5-year contract, and then there's this 12-month after. It doesn't seem like it's a revolving door that moves very quickly. It's I appreciate the spirit in which it was brought, but I just don't see this being a very big concern.
All right, let me call the question then, on the amendment. I'll start with Alan. Alan?
Yes.
Sky?
No.
Chris?
No.
Lynn?
No.
Bill?
No?
Eric?
Yes.
Keith?
No.
Reg?
No.
Karen?
Yes.
I'll vote no. Amendment fails. All right, you see one more.
Yeah,
right?
one more. Under the policy, section B, section 1, lines 75 through 78, CA personnel are strongly encouraged to report any unethical comment. My amendment is to end the sentence there and strike the rest of the sentence. We already have an ethics code that describes what is unethical comment, what is unethical conduct. The sentences here are superfluous. Because unethical conduct is governed by the ethics code. So I move to strike, including, for example, all the way through the end of that sentence.
Where was it again?
Under 75, line 75, page 2, under the policy, so this is page 2, line 75, CA personnel are strongly encouraged to report on any unethical conduct. My amendment is to stop the sentence there, period, and strike the rest of it, because the rest of it is giving examples, but we already have a code of conduct which specifies all the unethical conduct. So the examples are superfluous and
Second.
Yeah, so you're deleting,
I'm deleting, including, for example, then all of 76 and all of 77, and then and then all of 78 up until the beginning of the next sentence. I'll show you.
all right, I see.
I'll second it.
I already got a second from Keith.
It's been seconded.
All right, any discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This is under the section of complaints by CA personnel, right? And I think this is speaking to CA personnel. And we do have a board code of conduct, but I think it's important for CA personnel to at least have some of the amplifying remarks so that they have at least some guideposts. If we're talking about somebody at the dog park who is looking to report an ethical violation, they should at least have some sort of jump start here, and they may or may not be covered by the board code of conduct.
A point of information, well, it's not really a point of information, but right now we've already passed a single code of conduct. It's all one document now.
Right.
So they all have the same, everybody's got the same code of conduct.
Keith and Karen.
So, not to be flippant about this, but from what you were talking about there, I don't think anyone reads the code of conduct or the ethics panel or any of these documents, okay? So I'm just being very candid and upfront. And typically, when these things are trained in organizations, there are examples provided, whether they be in PowerPoint or other components. There is no one other than us and a couple of other people that are reading this thing in that level of detail. So that's the reason why I was in favor of striking that, because I don't think that it's I don't think it's so substantial that it's not going to be said to or told to staff. And if I'm incorrect in terms of the training strategies for the organization, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're training ethics, you don't read this. You have some subset of things that it describes for people how they should behave. Is that, would you, okay.
And hopefully more specific than this.
Yeah.
I don't need to ask my question now. Thanks, Keith.
All right. Any more
You agree?
discussion on this? I'll call the question. Karen?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Bill?
No?
Lynn?
Yes.
Chris?
Yep.
Sky?
Me? No.
Alan?
Yes.
And I'll vote no. Amendment passes. All right. Let's go then. We have the amended policy, and so I'm going to call for a vote on the policy and the charter.
Can I add one last amendment? And I'm sorry to be painful about this, but can we add, I would like to make a motion that we add the statement to the charter and the policy that if there is a conflict between either of those and the charter and bylaws, that the charter and bylaws prevail.
I'll second that.
Bill?
Isn't this the exact same argument that we just made about the paragraph that we just struck, that this is already known, that the charter and bylaws cannot be trumped by a policy, and now we're putting more information in that's, we already know, right? Isn't that the same argument?
One could say. Any discussion?
Guy and I have our hands up.
Yep, Alan, Sky? Alan?
Guy was first before me.
Sky?
I think there's no need to, it's understood that the charter and bylaws trump everything else. That's all.
Alan?
And I would agree with that. I agree with the sentiment, but I agree with Bill's and Sky's point. It's already a known fact.
All right, and I'll call the question. Alan?
Could you repeat the question? Is it to delete that or?
No, it's to add the sentence that Karen said about the charter and bylaws take precedence over policies.
No.
Alan votes no. Sky?
No.
Chris?
No.
Lynn?
Yes.
Bill?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Keith?
No.
Reg?
No.
Karen?
Yes.
I'll vote no. Amendment fails. All right, I'm going to call the question
I
now.
do have one question. It's not an amendment, it's just a question. Under the, so underlined on the, I just want to be clear on the, on the Ethics Committee charter. So if we're moving a member from the board, there's actually going to be two votes. One, the board would vote, and then the members would vote in accordance to the bylaws. Just want to verify that that's correct under our charter, under the proposed Ethics Committee charter.
Where are you looking?
Lines 127 to 132. There'd be two votes.
That's consistent with the long.
There's two votes.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to.
Remember, it just says make a recommendation.
I just want to clarify. Want to make sure that I was interpreting that correctly.
All right, with all the changes, I'm going to call the vote on ethics panel charter and the enforcement policy. Karen?
No.
Reg?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Eric?
No.
Bill?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Sky?
Yes.
Andy, yes. All right, it passes. Thank you. We are done with ethics after 18 months. All right, let's move on. Revised testimony for Howard County.
We've been at this since at least 2014.
We're not taking it up for the rest of this year.
Now something like the general plan.
Yeah.
So is this the easy part?
So just to let you know.
Thanks for your support.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Back in February, the CA board took a position on the Howard County general plan.
So just,
and they agreed
I assume you want 10 minutes?
Testimony.
I assume you want 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we have a position taken by the CA board, and they approved testimony. So the question is, should we send that testimony, or in looking over the testimony, Dennis, Eric, and I thought that maybe we should tweak the wording, not the position, but just the way it's written, so it sounds more for like the county council. So that's where this kind of came from. It's a question of wording. We can just simply send the approved testimony. It's already been approved by the board. We don't have to do anything. So just want to kind of get the board sense.
I want a motion to do nothing.
Yeah, we can do nothing. That's no problem. Yeah, it's already approved.
I mean, I think the board should testify, but can I get some rationale about why some of those sections were removed?
Oh, yes. First off, as Deb alluded, we wanted to bring up to the forefront the Newtown zoning stuff.
Right.
Because in our current approved testimony, it's buried. So after several paragraphs, in fact, it doesn't show up until like the fourth page. So one of the thoughts we had is we should move the Newtown zoning stuff up to where it was front and center first.
Okay.
And then put all the other things we said we supported after it. And then the one on concerns, it's because the original testimony was for the planning board and, it was focused on the planning board and BPC, and all those concerns actually are in the documents that went to the county council.
Okay.
Yeah, point of order, is there a motion on the table?
No.
No, not yet. She just, Karen just wanted to know.
Andy lets me ask questions.
No, I'm just wondering.
And you don't need to have it, just in terms of, we don't have to, there's nothing that states we have to have a motion on the table.
I was wondering.
I know, but I just wanted to clear that up in terms of the procedurally. There's nothing that says we can't have discussion on a topic.
We do that on the agenda.
Yeah.
So, so really just the question I wanted to put before the board is, you just want to send our original testimony or you want to send the revised testimony? That's really.
Guy's had her hand up for a while.
Sky.
Sky's hand is always up.
Hasn't taken it down yet.
Well, my hand is up.
We can't see you.
I just want to be clear. There are two documents that are called testimony. The first one is the original. The second one is the revised. Is that correct?
Yes. So the revised one says county council testimony. The original one just says testimony concerning the draft general plan.
Well, but that revised one says July 6th. This is the 27th.
I think you got backwards. I think.
Okay. So the first one is the revised.
I think B1 is the revised.
I don't know how it I'm sorry, I don't know how it actually showed up within the packet. It's just.
So I think 7B1 in the packet is revised.
Is the revised, and just testimony concerning draft general plan is the original.
Yes. And if you notice, it'll say at the end, it was approved by the Columbia Association Board of Directors February 22, 2021.
In February. Okay, thank you.
I think so 7B1 is the new, 7B2 on the top here. That's the original. That's correct. Yes. So,
that's correct.
So what's the original is 7B2. The new shorter version is 7B1.
All right. Any discussion with the board? We'll just send the original testimony. We can do that.
I like that you put, after hearing from Deb, I actually agree with the Newtown zoning being front and center.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Yep.
Eric, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the one thing I think is missing from here is there was a section here on schools.
Yeah.
And that's missing now. And the schools, considering that it seems to be missing from the general plan, and it seems to be a critical part, I think that should be in here.
Well, what they added instead was an entire chapter on the schools.
Oh, you guys were commenting on the fact that the schools was missing the chapter. Gotcha.
Missing.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. It was missing originally. The original general plan did not have any section on schools. And so the revised general plan then added in school section.
Oh, sorry. So what were I didn't understand.
So we had a paragraph in here that discusses, it doesn't actually discuss the fact that schools were absent from the general plan. It discusses our concerns about overcrowding in the schools and capacity. And I think that's an important thing to keep in the testimony, because that's one of the things Deb alluded to in her testimony. It's one of the things that needs to be brought out front and center. So I would like to see that paragraph. It's third one down on section 5, at least be copied over.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that actual stuff, the wording, when you say, concerned about growing student population challenges, is actually in the general plan document. Because they did, when they redid the school section, they made sure that the concerns raised by people were listed. I don't say that they addressed them particularly well, but they did acknowledge definitely.
Maybe that's one of the things we should point out is if we don't think that they addressed them well, let's point that out.
Yeah.
Can I ask about, did we also take out something about water and sewer? That's really important to this group, especially with the conversations that we've been having over the past couple weeks about stream restoration.
Oh, stream restoration, that is covered under the environmental. The water and sewer had to do with
The pipes.
Whether another a plant, whether we had to expand, whether we had enough capacity at the existing Little Patuxent plant, or whether an increase in density was going to cause the need for upgrade to the plant. So when we talk about water and sewer, that's what that focus was. It wasn't on, I'll say, stream restoration.
Right, okay.
Like that. But that's actually addressed in one of our sections on open space and environment. The county should ensure redevelopment is designed and implemented to reduce stormwater runoff and pollution loading to the maximum extent possible.
Okay.
Should create new incentives, things like that. So we did that under open space and environment. I mean, we can certainly add that paragraph, make it number 5. Schools, just copy that over.
Just anecdotally, new development does cause people's wells to dry out.
Okay. So I don't think that we should be making decisions based on anecdotal.
I'm not asking you to make a decision, Bill. I was just sharing some information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we get too far, am I getting a sense we want to send the revised testimony with something also mentioned schools?
I'd agree to that. Yeah.
Add the schools back in. Yep.
All right. Well, let's just do that. That's what we'll do. We'll send the revised testimony and we'll put the paragraph in about schools.
So there's also a paragraph on APFO, which sort of goes along with schools. Do we also want to put that plug in too?
Not until they actually do the APFO.
Yep. Okay.
Because basically what the general plan says is create exactly what Deb said, create a committee to go look at it. They kicked it down the road. They didn't make any recommendations. They just said, go form a committee. And it's like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. They're going to go form a committee. That's why. And yes, we definitely need to pay attention when they form that committee.
Yep.
I mean, that's important to us.
Yeah. We need a little bit of background on what APFO actually is.
I used to be on
A lot of misinformation about that.
All right.
I used to be in the one that under Alan Kilman.
Yeah.
All right, let's head on then. Board discussion, financial reports. Dennis?
Susan?
Sorry, did we need to vote on sending the revised testimony?
It was a consensus.
Okay.
We said we'd send it. I didn't hear any objections.
Okay, thank you.
So the audit committee, at the meeting of the audit committee last night, the independent auditors presented their reports on our audit on the CA's financial statement and the 401k plan. They both received unqualified or unmodified opinions. The results were very favorable, and I think the audit committee had a thorough and robust discussion. They also spent some time in executive session with the auditors to just hear independently from them about how the audit went and the results of the audit. There were no proposed audit adjustments, as you would have seen in the documents. You were all provided the documents to the audit committee. the team worked very hard. It's a challenge with a new audit firm, which we had this year, because they have to build their knowledge of Columbia Association and their permanent files and records. And I think they did a very good job. They asked good questions. They had good business sense, as well as being skeptical and independent auditors. And overall, the process went well, and the results were excellent.
And just to say, an unqualified rating is the highest possible rating that the organization could receive. This is a really big deal.
Yeah.
You want to say anything about the audit committee's comments? Or?
I'm getting a little exhausted here. It's 10 o'clock. The audit committee received the report from the auditors, and we engaged them on several different topics. They seem to be pretty knowledgeable. They've been learning very quickly. Once again, they didn't have any real concerns. Just nothing but praise for the staff, the preparedness, the documentation, the ease and willingness of staff to work with them. Just all great positive comments. So,
thank you, Bill. Sky?
Yeah, I'm a member of the audit committee, and I was simply blown away by the results. The audit was very thorough. There was no animosity at all. There was a constant flavor of cooperation, and any suggestions that were made by the auditors were immediately put into effect by the staff. So I was very impressed.
I actually just want to point out something that I don't think that may be underappreciated. If you look on page 7, under the lines cash and cash equivalents and restricted cash, beginning the year we began with 25.9 million and we ended with 33.9 million. To put this in perspective, if you go back to the financial report, say 10 years ago, those numbers would be not in the millions, those would be in the hundreds of thousands. The amount of savings that this organization has been able to accrue over the last couple of years has been impressive. So this also, I believe, includes the rainy day fund, which I think is now up to 8.1 million or so. So again, this is very impressive that we were able to go 10 years ago at $100,000, and now we're at almost $34 million of cash and cash equivalents on hand. So I think that gives the board some opportunities to look at how we want to invest in the future, and in looking in the when we go into the next budget cycle. And the other thing that I found impressive looking at this book was when you compare the revenue stream and the expenses stream, the revenue exceeds expenses by about $5 million for the year. So I think those are the two things that are important to point out for the board.
I would, hopefully each of you did receive your copy of the financial report. You wanted it printed. And also definitely, make sure you looked at the letter from Dennis that kind of gave you a little bit of the highlights. But,
Andy, you're getting quiet again.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and, second, what the audit committee said, and Eric, that this is a very, very good result. It's still, difficult economic times out there, and you see it in the sense that we're having lots of problems with large capital projects, and that there's problems, supplies and things like that, and price increases. So, that staff was able to exceed our budget targets is really good, and that helps us this year because it means we don't have to borrow as much money. We have a little bit of extra cash, and we don't have to then run to the short-term credit line to borrow. So, it makes this year, favorable too. So that's a good thing. So I do want to thank all the staff, Dennis, Susan, and everybody for a very good result for our fourth quarter report. Okay, dashboard. Dennis, anything with that in the dashboard?
I don't have anything.
Do you have a dashboard?
Yeah.
In the packet?
So remind the board that when we get the dashboard, we get the metrics. These were metrics that previous boards have chosen and told staff that they must report back on a quarterly basis to the board. And so that's why we see these. These are the ones that the board has told staff it wants tracked and reported back. So, and Susan, anything you want to say about the metrics?
No, I don't think so. I think they speak for themselves.
So Dan, anything you want to say about I see it's now called Qualtrics instead of Clarabridge.
Clarabridge bought Qualtrics.
Could you just give the new board members a really quick understanding what this is?
Okay, so every quarter, actually 3 quarters of the year now, we do a operational survey to the members. Anybody who's used any one of our facilities, and actually not members. If you're a non-member and we have your email address, you'll get the survey as well, but it's predominantly members. We do it 3 quarters of the year. In January, we've actually switched to doing a well-being survey, which is a more general check-in on stress levels and how people are doing and getting a feel for the pulse of the community. This survey, the key thing we track is the Net Promoter Score, which tracks the favorability of the business, and a high Net Promoter Score generally translates to a successful business. The industry average for golf and fitness is where there are hard metrics at, is around 40. Our last survey, we were at 37.8. We've been hovering as an organization around that 40 for the last several years. To put it in perspective, when I first started and I first implemented this, it was in the high 20s, low 30s. So we've come a long way. In this particular survey, we had about 700, we had 730 responses. And this time frame, this was done in April, so 524 of those were from the fitness clubs. That's the primary activity at that point in time. The Net Promoter Score for the fitness clubs was 47.6, so significantly higher. And in general, the Net Promoter Score is driven by facilities, programs, and staff. Members love our staff, which is always a good thing to hear. The hot spots in the last survey, golf. You see the N is very low, so it gets moved around a lot. But we happened to implement last year we implemented a lottery system on the weekends to accommodate all the traffic. That traffic hasn't decreased, so we implemented it during a couple days during the week at this time. And it's a different user group. So there was a few people who weren't too happy about it, but they're also happy that in FY19 we had 28,000 rounds at Hobbits. In FY23 we had almost 42,000. So they're happy to get on the course. They just and they've accommodated to it. And tennis, we raised the indoor court fees by $1. And so we had a little bit of feedback around that again, another very low end. Both in the 50s. There are a couple other boxes. Sentiment is generally when we get a lot of verbatims, and the power behind Qualtrics is the text analytics. And sentiment is how positive or negatively people are speaking when they're talking. -5 to 5. We're at a 0.31. So anything positive is generally considered solid. Effort is how hard people perceive it to do business with us. Again, -5 to 5. We're slightly negative at -1.05. And you get that with some reservation systems and then the golf court usage that creates the effort. We've actually managed to move that a bit. And emotional intensity is how strongly people are expressing their emotions. And that's 0 to 5, and 5 is generally better than 0. And we're at a 3, which is a very solid number. It dropped a little bit again because of the golf and tennis brought it down a little bit. But overall, a very strong survey, but it really gives us a lot of insight into what the members are, and we're constantly going out with touch points and use it to drive a lot of operational decisions.
Alan has a question. Alan?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Dan, you talked about net promoter scores in other organizations. Do we use the exact same questions and methods that other organizations use to get their net promoter score?
Yeah, there's a very specific methodology for calculating the net promoter score, and it's a very specific question. The question is, how likely are you to refer a friend or family member to this service or to whatever? That's a very specific question.
Got it. Thank you. One other thing, I don't know if this is yours or somebody else's, but under perception, there's main areas of conversation. There's bar by gender identity. There's bar by ethnicity and race. The last one, sexual preference, is not a term that's used in the industry anymore. Sexual orientation. Sexual preference implies it's a transient choice that people have.
Okay, thank you.
Can we change that?
Yes. Yes, I'll change it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dave? Eric?
Yeah, so the one metric that I sort of focus on is the resident market share, which sort of bounces around 25, 26, 27%. And the good thing is it's gone up this quarter to 27%. But the question I have is, what are some of the things that we as an organization can do to increase the resident market share and get more of our residents out using our facilities?
That's, again, increasing our membership. Our membership decreased because of COVID, so that decreases our market share. So as we continue to grow our membership, that number is moving back up. But we do focus our marketing on the Columbia market. And we have also really spent a lot of time promoting the Columbia card, which is an entry point into membership. So there is a lot of work that's being done to engage.
I guess the follow-on, is there anything the board could do or any actions the board could take too?
Every time you're out, tell people how great we are and encourage them to come visit.
I meant as a board,
that's
not
exactly,
individually.
it's word of mouth. There is nothing more powerful than a positive referral, which is why the Net Promoter Score is so powerful, because it is, will you refer it? And actually, I won't get too into because we're late, but you throw at people who are neutral, and you only look at the detractors and the promoters. So absolutely, you yell from the rooftops how awesome the programs and services that our team put on every day are, and encourage them to come visit us.
And don't we have the marketing efforts have really, I mean, you wrote about it in terms of the leads that are being produced, but I've just been, maybe it's because I'm on the board and I'm seeing it more. It's kind of like when you buy a car, you see it constantly, but I feel like I get a lot more positive communication at this point. So that's a shift that I assume that would help from that standpoint also.
Yeah, the team, I've been working with the marketing team for the last year. We've really focused on that and gone a lot more digital. We've brought on some great team members who work with getting the marketing message out, but also in conjunction with communications to get out the message about the great programming we're doing. And so that switch, there's a very specific focus that the team is, and they work right outside of my office, and it's just so much fun.
Yeah, I guess the concern I have is, so marketing certainly gets you to one threshold, but the concern I have is, are we running into an affordability wall with some of our residents?
No, we provide,
affordability
we have various options. That's why we have the tiered memberships, and we have income qualified memberships. And we create different accessibility offers. And that's why we have the Columbia Card. Columbia Card provides a level of accessibility. We have multiple ways you can engage and interact with us.
Dennis, anything you want to add? Yeah. All right. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Yeah. Okay, we added, pools and then residents speak out if we have time. So is the board willing to we'll start with pools? Bill, you brought up this topic.
I mean, I'm not excited about jumping into this unless there's a little bit more clarification on what it is we're jumping into. I respect that you want to put it on, but I don't know what we're going to be getting into.
I'll give you just the Columbia Association put out a press release last week that we're going to have to close a couple of pools a few weeks early due to staffing issues. And I've certainly seen a lot of traffic about it. I put this on the agenda last minute. I'd like to have a ground rule that we don't ask staff any specific questions about it. But I'd like to know what the rest of the board feels about it, what they're hearing. Maybe brainstorm a little bit for 10 minutes as to what we could do about it. I think it's an important topic that people are talking about in the town, and we should at least discuss it. That was my point.
So
would that be sufficient?
Yeah, I get it. I would ask that we not do that. I'm comfortable with, and this could be a vote to discuss or not.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with assigning it to staff, saying, we have concerns, because I agree. I've heard a lot of noise about the pools. I think that management is handling it, and if we as the board want something more, I think we need to just say, hey, we'd like to understand a little bit more of a debrief or something like that. So I don't know that I want to get into a discussion, is what I'm saying, so that the board can tell the staff how to handle scheduling and staffing, because they're more intimate with it than we are.
Fair point.
Yeah, I mean, I support Bill's request to talk about the pools because Talbot Springs is in my village and people are not happy that pool is going to close in a couple days. And this is the second year in a row that Columbia Association has had to close pool. And I understand that, COVID and other things, but I would really like to see a plan for how we can avoid that next year.
I agree wholeheartedly. I just don't know that it's the board to decide the plan. It's just to me, it's the board to say, I'm irritated about pool closures because of what I'm hearing.
Right.
And well, not irritated. I'm hearing a lot of feedback about pool closures generally, but I don't know that the board's going to solve that. Is all.
Well, Dennis sent out a report earlier today. I think Dennis sent a letter talking about the staffing issues. And I do think in the board's role of oversight, this is something where, this is important to the residents. I mean, nobody speaks up faster than they find out their pool is being closed. Alan's got one in Longfellow, Andy's pool at Dasher Green is being closed.
I'll pull back my objection to discussion then, so we're not discussing whether we should discuss.
Andy, given the late hour, I'm going to call the question for the vote as to whether we should discuss pools while we're discussing pools here.
Sky and Alan.
Okay.
We might as well
Alan?
vote on it because we're discussing it anyway.
Well,
Yeah, I just,
Okay, Alan.
contrary to, I'm sorry, did you call on me?
Yes.
Andy, okay. Contrary to Bill, to your suggested guideline, my only thing, because I agree with Keith that we're not going to come up with a plan. There was a claim made in the Longfellow, whoever put out that petition that we just got a link to, that Longfellow is the only fully ADA compatible pool. And I just wonder if that's an accurate description.
That is not. I spoke with that gentleman personally on the phone the other day and clarified all of his points, because all of his points are all slightly off. They're not all 100% accurate. And I had a long conversation with him.
Yeah.
Sky.
yeah, it seems like we've been talking about this for 5 minutes. Have we decided to discuss it or not?
That's why, Sky, I pulled off my objection to discussing
Could we do that after we discuss it?
Yeah. So what am I going to suggest is, why don't we give staff time to do like a lessons learned? and they can report back to us about all of this, because it is very tough for the board to start discussion without, I'll say, the background information. Because we end up talking about it, then we end up having to talk about it again, because then we get the background information. And so what I suggest is, why don't we just have staff work on it, and we are going to expect a discussion, based on the information that they provide.
Andy, can we just refer this to the Board Operations Committee for putting it on
But I
the
would
agenda?
suggest we put it on,
Okay, calling for me, thank you. So I agree with you. I think that's the way we should go. I will say, though, that I've been getting a lot of emails and phone calls from residents saying, hey, why are our polls closing early? And, why, we pay all this money to CA. So I would very much like to, have some information to be able to come back to the residents and say, this is why, this is what's going on. That way, I don't look stupid. I look like, we have something educated to say.
Eric?
So I think there's actually two issues. One's people are concerned about the polls closing, but I think the other issue is people are also upset about the surprise. So this was unexpected. So people are getting emails and all of a sudden their pools are closing unexpectedly. So I think it's two things that need to be addressed is, can we keep all the pools open? And if we can't, can we alert residents, at least at the beginning of the season?
Karen and then Dan.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say, if you haven't read the letter that Dennis sent, it's pretty thorough and talks about the staffing issues and the things that they've done. It answered a lot of my questions. The surprise that Eric just mentioned, that is the problem, especially in my village. When Marty came to the village board meeting just 2 weeks prior and talked about everything great about the aquatics and never mentioned that we were going to have a staffing issue and there was a chance we were going to be closing pools early. So the Oakland Mills Village board was not, they wondered why that didn't come up. So I think everybody understands the staffing issues. But yeah, and I think that, like, from my perspective, what I would really like to see from the staff is, what other things can we do? The recruiting process, whatever we're doing, how is that working? And, are we doing everything that we can? Or are we just at our wits' end at this point? And so.
Dan, I'll give you the last word. Oh, sorry, Scott.
Are you at your wits' end?
Yes. I want to impart how complex operating these pools are, and the number of moving parts. This is not the little Timex you used to get. This is literally a Swiss watch. And the amount of effort the staff goes through to make these things work every year. And they do not do anything other than try to provide pools for the community. I was clear early on that we were worried about August because of what happened last August. And so that has been our refrain for the entire time, because it is just, we are a circumstance that we are not used to anymore. And like I said, this is a Swiss watch where these things work. When a spring breaks, it breaks. Literally, we did not know what was happening and what the extent of it was until we asked for availability in the middle of July for August. Up to that, everybody's like, yeah, we're working. And then when you actually have to put your name on the schedule is when all of a sudden nobody's there. So these are challenges that we have to work through. First, I have to get to Labor Day, and I have to keep the team together to get through Labor Day. So any support that can be given to get through that. The questions you're asking yourselves are questions we are asking ourselves to try to figure out what this is, because this has been, the team has, and it's not just the aquatics team, it's the human resources team, it's the marketing team for recruiting, it's communications for recruiting, it's Dennis's, the community operations team for opening. I mean, it's like everybody's working to make these things happen. And it is not an easy answer. And the way we have these things pulled together, and it's also some of our own fault. We overextend ourselves. And we do too much, which requires more and more staff and creates this kind of a Jenga that you pull one piece out and it falls down. So we are all concerned about this and what our ability is to fix it and what the opportunities to fix it are. I met with somebody the other day. She's a restaurateur in Howard County, and we were kind of talking about this. She's a member of Columbia Gym. We were at a different board meeting, and she's like, yeah, I have 6 people on the floor last night. Only 2 of them are going to be here in 2 weeks. It's this phenomenon that we're all going through. So it is a structural change in the way people are working that we have to figure out.
Sky.
Yeah, I think we're all aware that there is a nationwide shortage of lifeguards. I'm up in New York, and at Chautauqua, they have had to close some beaches this summer due to that. I think that Dan and CA has done an excellent job of notifying everybody, unfortunately, of bad news. And also at my village board meeting Monday night, Danica Rhymes was there, and she gave us an excellent explanation. There are several parameters that were involved in the decision making, and it's not just one. There may be one major one, but other decisions, other parameters help make the decision of those particular 4 pools. So I think the staff has done an excellent job of weighing the pros and cons, and unfortunately had to make a very difficult decision.
Eric and then Keith.
Yeah, so Dan, you mentioned that we had a whole bunch of staff lined up in May, June, July, and then, or May and June, and then all of a sudden July, the staff that had basically said that they were going to work August decided they're no longer working August. Do you have a sense of why a whole bunch of staff initially committed to working August and now is no longer working August?
Generally, they want to keep working. So they're going to say, and they may have good intent to work, but some of them knew they were going back. They go back to school, family vacations come up. I'll tell you from camp, I have a specific example. It's not pools, the same scenario. A young girl for camp went to the director and asked for time off. And it was last minute, and the director made it happen. And the little girl said, well, that's good, because my mom told me just not to come if you said no. And that's what we're dealing with. That's the general consensus. But we are losing kids back. It's in both the memo I sent and what Dennis sent. Kids going back to college, families going on vacation, and then I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, so then I'm just not going to work the last 2 weeks. There's a lot of scenarios of why people are leaving earlier and earlier.
Yeah, I mean, kids know when they're going back to college, but I'm more interested in the unexpected cases, why someone would commit to work in August.
That's a good question. Yeah. I don't have teenagers. If you can help me out and understand why, but that's...
I think, at least for my teenagers, like if and this isn't related to this specifically, but if they're just done, like if you irritate them, they're like, well, I don't need to do this, so I'm not going to do it anymore, or I'm not going to make the right arrangements. And I'm not saying it's the most appropriate. And I talk to my kids about the appropriate handling, but that's what I'm hearing a lot more. Also, is that if the kids have too much, if it's too challenging to do the work, to schedule the work, to any of that kind of stuff, they're more inclined to say, I'm just going to go do this thing, is what my personal, pieces be. The only thing I wanted to ask is like a consideration is, have you considered like remote or hybrid lifeguards? I just...
All right.
I think that's it.
Phone a little more to the left.
I think we're done.
We can maybe do hybrid
Next thing you're
swimming.
going to say is AI.
Yeah. We can have some
We
AI
could.
lifeguards. It's coming.
ChatGPT.
The other thing was resident speak out?
Yes. Do we want to talk about resident speak out for a few minutes?
Talk about that? It's just a general discussion. We're not going to make any decisions right
No.
I'll ask Keith's question from before. Why are we talking about resident speak out?
Well, I think that I think that we need to find a balance with resident speak out. We always put 30 minutes on our agenda for resident speak out, and it's never 30 minutes. Quite honestly, for all of the things that have been said at Resident Speak Out, I'm thankful for residents coming out and talking with us. I think that board members like the back and forth with the residents. I think some of the residents like the back and forth with the board. But we typically have board meetings for doing board business, and we got to find a balance. And if you look at the HOA Act, it says that, I believe it says that the HOA has to provide for members to speak out on what's on the agenda for that night, and they have to have at least one meeting during the year where members can speak on anything. Now, given that we're all the members, we're going way beyond, and we're awfully good to people. Not even to say about the 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute time, and 1 minute response. And I think maybe we should think about restructuring it and talking about, I know that being on the Board of Appeals, we had lots of residents and members to come out and speak, and we had, rules about that, and that was done in a different way, and I think it was a different result, and we can talk about those things. I also think that the idea of having just 1 or 2 meetings a year where it's just like, come out and tell us what you think, a soapbox night, would be fantastic for this board to sit through just 3 or 4 hours of resident speak out once a year. Just some things to think about and kick around some ideas. I don't think that how we're doing it right now is super effective for either the residents or for us. And I just want to see if we could brainstorm and be creative and maybe put together a committee or something to think about how to look at this policy and look at ways to improve it. So,
okay,
12 minutes, go.
Guy and Ellen? Sky?
I have a lot of ideas about resident speak out that were given to me by residents over the past year and a half, and I was probably a guilty one. I believe I spoke at nearly every single meeting last year. I had broached the topic of this being an agenda item, and I thought it would be discussed at the Board Operations Committee meeting, but it wasn't. So I think it's necessary that we do discuss it. And if I can find my list of probably 12 or 13 different modifications that we could make to the resident speak out, I'd like to have some of those ideas discussed. And I think the resident speak out tonight was very good. It was good to limit the board members' questions and comments, and I think it was very effective. Thank you.
Okay, Alan and then Keith.
Yeah, we've had over the last couple of years, I think basically 2 related issues that have had residents speak out. Maybe 2 issues, 2 are related, take a lot of time. But I recall when we appointed Dennis as interim president, he said, I don't think it was in a meeting, but it was, a couple of us were hanging out, and he said, it'll calm down. It'll calm down. And sure enough, around the issue of the president, it calmed down within, if not the next meeting, the meeting after. I think this whole, now that we've put the ethics thing to bed, now that we are putting the Lake Elkhorn thing to bed, I think that's going to calm down. I think Resident Speak Out is been working great, as long as we school ourselves to not give our opinions. We should be asking questions, not telling people how much we like them, not telling people how much we appreciate the program that they do, but just ask them questions about what they've said. That's our purpose during Resident Speak Out. If we limit that to that, I think we're doing fine.
Keith and then Karen.
2 things, and I guess to respond to that. Just a point. I don't know that I feel like the Lake Elkhorn issue is closed. I think that I understand that there is some back and forth that needs to be done between CA and WSSI. However, to understand all of that, but I believe that there are some things that are brought up by the residents and when they come to speak that we need to figure out how to incorporate or put in place. One of the things that I was thinking about is measurement, that we don't seem, I don't know that I've seen that in terms of, measuring where we are so that we can always talk about where we're going or how well we're improving. But the other piece is I'm going to make my standard pitch in that we haven't talked about it. I'll talk about the committees again and the fact that this would be a great topic for either the Board Operations Committee underneath the charter as I understand the Board Operations Committee, or it would be great for said new committee that's been approved by the board that can't be supported by staff that we haven't finalized in terms of what we're going to do. So at some point, we have to discuss board operations, and I'm excitedly waiting in the wings to have those types of conversations.
Karen?
Yeah, I want us to be really, really careful about resident speak out. I think that any attempts to change or restructure the way we do resident speak out will be seen as a way to try to silence the residents. And I think that one of the issues that we're confronting right now is a lot of residents feel a lack of respect from the Columbia Association, and limiting residents speak out just feeds into that. And I think that's what that's some of the things that we're trying to work on, right? So I would just urge caution.
Reg?
So I agree with Karen that, any limitation to the speech of, somebody coming before us and just giving their opinion really does more harm to us than good. And it's an opportunity for them to say, a resident to say what they want to say. They pay their assessments, they come here, they live here, they participate. They want to participate in what we do. They may not be on the board, but they want us to hear what they are thinking. So to limit their conversation, and I know no one's saying that, but just to limit it would be counterproductive to us.
Okay. Alan, I noticed your hand is up. Is that a new one? Or? Alan?
It's down.
Sorry about that.
Sky, your hand is also.
Thanks for noticing.
In my village, we use resident speak out at the beginning of the meeting, and there are 3 consequences of a resident speaking out. Number 1 is to consider the issue important enough to put on a future agenda. Number 2 is to refer the resident to a more appropriate department to get an answer for him. It might be referring them to a county or a CA department. And number 3, just to listen and say thank you. So that's just for edification.
All right. Let's move on. Questions only. Anything? Proposed new topics? I think we already talked about that. Chair's remarks. I just want to say that there have been some website changes to our web, and I really like the open space. The new open space area. If you have a chance, look at it. It's much easier to find things. So I want to thank Dennis and staff for that. And remind everyone that our next official meeting will be in September. So enjoy the month of August.
Point for that is, that'll also be our budget strategy meeting. So
Yes. Yeah.
bring all your ideas for what we should be doing in the next fiscal year.
You'll get an email from me as we get closer.
Yeah, it's talk to your villages, talk to everybody, come back with where we should go. That's an important meeting.
All right. Hearing nothing else, if there is no objection.
Did we have anything with the Ann Arbor that we needed to do?
I asked if there was any questions.
Okay, no questions.
What did he say?
Alan's in the bathroom. Alan, were you talking?
Alan?
It sounded like he was underwater.
I think it's background noise.
He said he's in the bathroom.
Okay, well, hearing no objection,
Motion to
we're
adjourn.
adjourned.
Hoorah.
Thank you all. I'm a little later, but not bad.
One of those
Hey, Dennis.
lifeguards.